Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's a very, very special day, and it's a big opportunity for us as well to come together as a community and do something that's really going to mean something in our near future. WHPR 88.1 radio show host Nate Frazier and I, my name is Keon Purite of Heart to Hearts, I'm a co-host, presents the Washtenaw County Prosecutor Forum. So just put your hands together, you know. We also just want to thank everybody for giving us, Heart to Hearts, the opportunity to be a part of something just so meaningful and important. Starting from a small podcast in our living room, doing things for the community and speaking out for the community with wrongful convictions, political events, fundraisers for the community, and down to small businesses, you know, just giving people a voice in the community. So starting from there, it's a very humble beginning, and being here today to host this event is really, really special. So also give a round of applause for everyone that pitched in to make this possible. So we just want to show love to them as well. Without further ado, let's put our hands together and welcome our amazing candidates that seek in Washtenaw County's top law position for 2020.
Welcome everyone. Thank you, Brother Keon, co-host of Heart to Hearts. I'm excited today. Are y'all excited?
Yeah.
Are y'all excited? Before I go into the forum, I would like to make this announcement. I didn't know the third candidate that was running. I had no clue that he was running, and I was notified at the very last minute. So if you didn't see him publicized on the flyer or anything, it's because I didn't have any clue. But his campaign party did reach out to me. So I wanted to be fair. He is a running candidate, and I just think that it's fair on my part to give him the opportunity as well as the other two. So Hugo Mack is here today on the panel. A lot of people have been asking me, you know, why did you do this, why did you do that, because I didn't know. So we got that settled. But we're here today. We're here today. We have Eli Sabat, Ariane Slay, and Hugo Mack. I'm going to start off first. I'm going to ask Hugo Mack just to tell a little bit about himself, not your professional side, but something personal about him that maybe someone don't know.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? No.
Did you turn your record?
Yes, I did. Well, first of all, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'm sure the other candidates do too. Just something about myself. I am an immigrant. I was born in Colon, Panama in 1954. My parents came here when I was 5 years old. I know what it's like to be treated differently. I got incessantly teased by my peers and some teachers because of my heavy accent, being made to feel a little bit different and having to overcome that. I'm a product of the Ann Arbor public schools, K through 12, University of Michigan, University of New York. Came back and practiced law in the public defender's office and now in private practice. A person who's had to overcome obstacles in payment of debts not owed, but moving forward. So when you want to talk about just something about myself, I know what it's like to come from nothing to try to rebuild, to stand for truth. So I would hope to get an opportunity to expand on these things as the conversation goes on. But those are things about myself. My parents are both deceased. I lost my eldest brother, Art, to cancer in 2005. I have 3 sisters, Terry, Dawn, and Andrea. Our family is well established in Ann Arbor. Proud to be a resident of Washtenaw County, and proud to offer my services to the community today. Thank you.
Is this on? Okay. Any questions?
Yes.
All right. Well, my name is Eli Sabat. Thanks to everybody for coming out today. It was fantastic to see such a huge crowd 10 months ahead of this primary election and interest in how we're going to move forward with our criminal justice system. Thanks especially to Nate and Keon for putting this together and for having us here. This is really fantastic. So I'm looking forward to, telling you a little bit more about what I stand for and of course my professional career, but since I'll answer the question, I was born and raised in Ann Arbor. I grew up in Burns Park over on Brooklyn Street, graduated from Tappan Middle School, Pioneer High School, where I played on the basketball team. We won the state championship my sophomore year, but I was not moved up to varsity, which I'm not at all bitter about, and don't at all still remember to this day and talk about in public forums or anything like that. My parents are both educators. My dad taught physics. My mother still teaches little kids cello out of our home. So another thing that you may not know about me is that I know literally every way that a 4-year-old can hit the wrong note on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on a little tiny cello. That was the sort of soundtrack to my childhood. I went to Calvin College. I'm not going to get into my professional background. I graduated from the University of Michigan Law School, but the other thing that I do want to emphasize is although we're going to talk a lot about our legal backgrounds, I actually started my career as an 8th grade U.S. history teacher, teaching special education, general education classes. That is something that informs and continues to inspire my work in my professional career as a lawyer and in seeking this office. So again, thanks to all you guys for coming out, and I'm really looking forward to having a great conversation with my fellow candidates here.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ariane Slay, and I'm a trial attorney, so I pace when I walk. So don't give me a cordless mic if you don't expect me to move around a little bit. Not for the speaker, though. Something personal with like my 60 closest new friends, right? I wanted to be a prosecutor, but something a lot of people don't know about me is that I wanted to be a public defender first. And I started my professional career in the public defender's office as an intern. And I quickly decided that that probably wasn't the way I needed to go, and I needed to go back to my roots. And I needed to be inspired. And the person who has inspired me professionally the most is my dad. Now, my dad grew up in the lowlands of Kentucky, pre-segregation, and he left his home at a very young age after watching his father be lynched. He left the next day and he didn't come back for decades. And shortly thereafter, he joined the service with his brother, and they were in Nam. When he came back, he became a police officer in the state of Indiana. Now, we can all chuckle about that. Now, what black man becomes a police officer in the state of Indiana in the late 60s? He became the first black command officer in the state of Indiana. And when he talked about that when I was older, I would say, "Daddy, why would you do such a thing?" And he said, "There are different ways to evoke change. You can protest. You can sit at the lunch counter. You could go into the lion's den." When I had the opportunity to make change in the criminal justice system, I went into the lion's den. I understand that our criminal justice system is not without issue. We need a lot of reform. I chose to go into the lion's den, in which I have been faithfully serving since 2008. I went into the lion's den because I was inspired by my dad to make change. So this is a little something personal about me. So thanks for the awkward silence, Nate.
I'll speak up. Thank you all three candidates. We want to get this forum started, debate forum. I want to open up with a question with Eli Savage. Eli, my question to you to open up this debate Why do you feel the Washtenaw County Prosecutor Office needs to be disrupted?
All right, let's get it started. So, look, I was the first of the 3 candidates that are sitting here in front of you to announce my candidacy. I announced my candidacy in May before the current prosecutor retired. At the time, I believed that the current prosecutor was running for re-election, and I decided to throw my hat in the ring because I thought it was time to make real systemic change to our prosecutor's office. And you ask what I think needs to be disrupted. I prefer to speak a little bit more softly and say what I think we need to fundamentally change. But the truth of the matter is, I've seen in this prosecutor's office a reflection of the criminal justice policies that have failed this country over the past several decades. It is a reflection of our national era of mass incarceration, and I am running, and I got in this race to change that. Now I'll talk a little bit more specifically about what I think needs to be changed. Number one, we're not addressing the root causes of crime. Number two, we have severe racial and socioeconomic inequity in our system. And number three, we have a prosecutor's office that is not nearly transparent or accountable enough to citizens. So I will talk a little bit about those in turn. And I like numbers, I like data, so excuse me if throughout the course of this debate, I bring out statistics. But a couple of statistics that really strike me. We have in this county close to a 70% recidivism rate, right? That means that nearly 7 out of 10 times that somebody comes through the criminal justice system, they're gonna come right back in, right, for another offense. At the same time, 80%, and this is by some measures a conservative estimate, of the people in our justice system are struggling with some underlying form of substance abuse. Now, taken together, those two things suggest to me that we're doing something wrong, that we're not addressing the root cause of crime, right? And it's ultimately making all of us less safe because nobody is made safer when people cycle through the criminal justice system over and over and over again, and in a lot of cases, the behavior escalates, right? So that is something that I'm committed to reforming. I want to prioritize rehabilitation and treatment over incarceration in a way that hasn't been done before at this prosecutor's office. Racial and socioeconomic inequity. Every time you pull back the curtain on this prosecutor's office, you see some severe inequity. 70% of the kids in our juvenile justice system are black, as opposed to just 12% of the general population. In this county, you are 8.5 times more likely to be held on cash bail because you're not able to pay if you are black than if you are white. That is the highest discrepancy out of any county that's been surveyed in the state of Michigan. So I'm committed to rooting out racial and socioeconomic inequity, and the current prosecutor's office has not taken a hard look at it. When asked, what are you going to do to eliminate these inequities, in a major national publication, the prosecutor's office said, we don't keep track of that. We don't make any effort beyond having a policy that we don't charge people based on race to eliminate that inequity. To me, that's unacceptable. We can't bury our head in the sand any longer. And the third thing is we just have a prosecutor's office that fundamentally lacks transparency. It is virtually impossible to know, if you log on to the prosecutor's office's website, what they're doing, whether they're getting results, what kinds of sentences they're seeking, how they are spending your money. And I'll give you, just sort of an example which I think illustrates this. Like I said, I got in this race thinking that I was going to challenge Brian Mackey. And when a couple weeks later, Ariane announced her candidacy, and it was in MLive that she was doing it. She said, well, Brian's retiring. And they tried to confirm that with the prosecutor's office. And the prosecutor's office didn't call back. So they had to file a Freedom of Information Act request with the prosecutor's office to get an email that he sent to his staff to find out that the current prosecutor's office the current prosecutor is not running for re-election. That's not transparency. But more fundamentally, we should be keeping track of every dollar that the prosecutor's office is spending, of every sentence that they're seeking, right? Because they work for you. I want to be held accountable. I want to be transparent in this work, and I want to get results. And when I am prosecutor, you are going to see a massive commitment to transparency, you are going to see data, and you are going to see outcomes available online as prosecutors from Philadelphia to Chicago are doing. You are going to be able to check me, and you are going to be able to hold me accountable to make sure that I am getting results for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eli. I'm going to go to Mary Ann and ask her, how do you feel about, or do you feel there is a need for the county prosecutor's office to be district?
Absolutely. So I was in the county prosecutor's office for 9 years. And I know I'm getting that look right now from some of you, like, she's one of them. Keep in mind that those folks out there who have worked in the county prosecutor's office have been public servants, some of them for decades and decades. But I will tell you this, and take a look at me now, I am not Brian Mackey. I am not Brian Mackey. And for those of you who haven't seen me yet today, I'm not Brian Mackey. I am Ariane Slay. For 9 years, I did work for Brian Mackey. He did give me an opportunity to start when I had no experience. And I am grateful for that experience because I learned about the Constitution. I learned about the Crime Victims' Rights Act. I learned how to prosecute everything from drunk driving to homicide. And so I understand what it takes to keep our community safe. But does the current prosecutor's office need a little shaken up? Absolutely. Because if we're looking at reform, you gotta go back into the lion's den. I left in 2017. And I left for that opportunity to be able to have my own division at the city attorney's office. I'm still a prosecutor. I get to have amazing dispositions on cases that involve restorative justice. And amazing dispositions of cases that involve diversion. And they're really taking the time to get to know each one of our defendants. I have the opportunity to spend time in our specialty courts, which are our problem-solving courts, like mental health treatment court and the veterans court, which is incredibly important. But right now our county is in crisis and we need help. When I first started in the prosecutor's office, we maybe had 4 or 5 homicides a year. The last time I took a look at that list, we had 33 pending open death cases in this county. We have been doing something wrong. There is something we are neglecting. And part of that has to do with the fact that when we are having that first brush with the criminal justice system, when we are first having contact with people, they are in crisis for mental health, they are in crisis with substance abuse, and we are not addressing those needs appropriately. The sheriff and I have worked very closely and talked about diversion and bringing the law enforcement assisted diversion program that they have done in King County right here to Washtenaw. And that program will take people with low-level offenses who are in crisis and divert them away from the criminal justice system. We're not talking about recidivism because we're not charging them with crimes. We're putting them in treatment. They get the assessment that they need and they go to treatment and we never charge that case. People have recidivism issues. They are re-offending when we're not providing the service. Because I have been working with Avalon Housing and Safe House and community mental health, and I have been doing this for a career for the last 14 years, I know that it takes a village to heal our community. And I'm interested in anyone else who has a special skill that wants to come in and help, not just our offender population, but our victim population, and to work on those practices of restorative justice, and to work on those practices of diversion, and to work with the prosecutor's office. We don't have to be a silo any longer. And if we need to disrupt things to open our doors so that we are working collaboratively together as a community, so be it. I'm the one who's ready to make that happen.
If I understand the question correctly, let me be very specific to the voters. In terms of shaking up the Washtenaw County Prosecutor Attorney's Office, the problem starts at the top. Perception is, in fact, reality. A prosecutor, unlike the current prosecutor, is first and foremost a minister of justice. A minister of justice. That's what we are sorely missing right now. And I'm the person to bring that imagery of ministry of justice to the community. Because you see, when you perceive the chief law enforcement officer in the county as being a minister of justice, then you start to feel public trust. People start feeling like they're not outsiders anymore. We have a problem with crime. Why? Because people do not have faith in the integrity of the system. They feel they're going to be overlooked by the police. They feel they're going to be overrun by the prosecutors. That starts at the top. So a minister of justice, as I will do, all of my attorneys will be home district. Every county in this community is going to have a prosecutor assigned to public affairs, picnics, all sorts of events. So you, the citizens, will know that your prosecutor cares about you. If you know that I care about you, you're going to be helping us to make the system better. So now in terms of recidivism, I understand what it's like to fight your way through a penitentiary and come out and be shunned and can't get a job at Myers stacking tomato cans because you've been to penitentiary. I understand what it's like to come out and be told, the great people of the state of Michigan say you are not qualified to serve on jury duty. I understand what it's like to struggle for a job, even with advanced degrees. What poor person is going to stand a chance coming out of the penitentiary with just a high school diploma? I understand what it's like. And as the prosecutor, my pledge is within the first 90 days of administration, I'm going to go to every chamber of commerce in this county and tell them, give people a chance. We do not get anywhere positive by ourselves. No one in this room has gotten anywhere positive without some help from somebody else. That's right. So now in terms of shaking up the prosecutor's office, I've also said that in terms of the staff, we're going to have sensitivity to understand there are racial divisions and divides in this country. They exist in this county. African-American males comprise approximately 3.8% of this county's population, but nearly 50% of the jail population. Now, there's got to be some reasons for that. And make no mistake, I'm not talking about giving somebody a get-out-of-jail card because of the color of their skin. What I'm talking about is an honest, frank discussion about race, policing, and policy. That is what is sorely missing right now in the prosecutor attorney's office. And if you don't have the chief law enforcement officer of this county talking about it, who is going to talk about it? You or I? We don't have the power, as a prosecutor does, to affect someone's life with a stroke of a pen. We don't have the power to charge somebody and perhaps ruin their life forever. No, the prosecutor's got that authority. You need somebody that's accountable. And unlike some other prosecutor, I'm going to be out talking to people, you in the streets. You won't have to look for me in my office looking for parking meter change. I will be out there. I will be out there where you are, ground to ground, facing people where they are. I've sent a clear message in terms of me and shaking the prosecuting attorney's office to every law enforcement officer in this county, including the sheriff that is here. The role of the prosecuting attorney's office is not to be a friend of the police. That is wrong. The role of the prosecuting attorney's office is to be a partner with the police for justice and integrity and public safety. Friends oftentimes cover up for each other. They make excuses. They give a perception of one in lead. Particularly in the African-American community, that is a major problem. People feel there's all too friendly relationship between the police and the prosecutor. And we have some excellent police officers, don't get me wrong. But when you have a pattern systemically, where African-Americans in particular are victimized by police brutality and shootings more than anyone else, we've got to address that problem. And that is the message that I've sent to every law enforcement officer in this state, to every law enforcement officer in this county, and that is the pledge I have with you for public safety. Come January 2021, when I'm elected prosecutor, that office down on Main Street in Ann becomes your office. It is not a kingdom to be doled out to someone. It is certainly not a position to be bought. It is your office. And when I'm elected, I will be your representative and your ally, and you can count on me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. I'm going to go back to Mr. Mack because I want to talk about qualifications right now. What qualifies you to run for the prosecutor's office? I read your article on MLive, and you were talking about how you were incarcerated. And by you being incarcerated, you understand the system and how the system is ran, and that qualifies you. So my question to you, when it comes down to being a qualified candidate, are you saying in that article, because you were incarcerated and the things that you went through, that that gives you more qualifications or qualify you just as the next two candidates that are running? I want you to explain to the people in detail what did you really mean when you by that article.
I appreciate the question, Nate. First of all, in terms of my qualifications for office, we'll deal with the penitentiary in a moment. My extensive career as a public defender for 12 years, trying every case for people stealing candy and gum, from Myers to first-degree murder, and all matters in between. My extensive career as a juvenile public defender, only representing the best interests of juveniles that I was charged to represent, but more importantly, representing the interests as guardian ad litem, as this county's guardian ad litem for abused and neglected children. So my experience is vast in terms of understanding what it's like to prosecute and be involved in holding someone accountable. I did that for 6 years. Hundreds of cases in league with the state, including termination of parental rights. A very hard thing to do, separate someone from their child. I know what it's like to make a hard decision. So my qualifications are my experience as an attorney. My qualifications are my experience running a large law office, every bit as comparable to the Washtenaw County Prosecutor's office. As the Chief Assistant Public Defender, Mr. Powell, a great leader, my mentor, gave me charge of staffing, budget, finances, case management, case evaluation. I understand what it's like to make hard budgetary decisions, and I understand what it's like to approach the county commissions for money. I understand that. In terms of my experience in the penitentiary, let's be very honest about that. Do I say that qualifies me for service? I don't know if it qualifies me for service, but two things. It certainly should not disqualify me from service, and it certainly adds a dimension to a prosecutor who knows what it's like. A prosecutor who knows the system not merely exponentially from the outside in, ladies and gentlemen, but from the inside out. And I ask you to be frank with yourselves. If you're a person that's charged with crime, and that defendant's chair has everyone and no one's name on it at the same time, by the way, do you want a prosecutor who knows what it's like to actually be in the system, or do you want someone who has an abstract understanding of it? If you're the victim of crime, do you want somebody who has an abstract understanding of what they're trying to send someone to, or someone who actually knows that? The public can only gain from that kind of experience. So no, the penitentiary does not qualify me supremely. It does give me a rare opportunity and insight to offer service in the Office of the Prosecuting Attorney's Office. And it also gives a great imagery to people that we are a society that allows people to come out and rebuild. We are a society that is not mean-spirited. We're not a society that continues to make a person pay and pay and pay and pay, despite their debts to society. Not one person in this room would want that done to them, and they wouldn't tolerate it being done to somebody else. When I'm the prosecuting attorney, I'm not going to victimize someone because they paid a debt. I will judge them fairly when crimes are charged. I'm not going to punish them for being an habitual offender unless and until that's appropriate. That's the promise I'm making to you, the citizens of Washtenaw County.
One more question. Mr. Mack, is the fact that you having a record, having that on your record, does that affect you in any way to be the prosecutor? Say, for instance, how can you try a case, or we'd be able to try a case, we'd be able to access the files and things like that, running for a prosecutor with the past history? That's my next question. How would that happen? I mean,
Can Mr. Mack get a better mic? Because his kind of fades in and out. Can you get a mic from over on the other side?
Can you hear me at all?
Can
You hear me?
Yeah, you got to bring it closer. Keep it closer.
I apologize. The greatest book that I ever read says you can judge a tree by the fruit that it bears. For years, I defended poor people, disadvantaged people, black people, poor women of all natures. I want to tell you something about this question, and I'm glad you asked it. I defended a woman by the name of Ginger Trussell in 1988. She was charged by the Washtenaw County Prosecuting Attorney's Office with slashing a man with a knife, assault with intent to commit great bodily harm, less than murder. That case, the prosecutor was a man by the name of Kurt Nissel, a very talented and aggressive prosecutor. In front of the jury, I explained to the jury that Ginger Trussell was the victim of domestic violence. I explained to the jury that Ginger Trussell was the victim of repeated beatings and assaults. I explained to the jury that Ginger Trussell was the victim of what we now know as battered woman syndrome, which is quite real. I explained that to the jury and got them to understand that what she did in self-defense. After the jury heard that, the verdict, not guilty. So fighting for what is right, defending individuals that have been done wrong is what my core being is all about. Since reestablishing my law practice 10 years ago, a third of my clients are women. A disproportionate amount of them are poor women and women of color. You can judge a tree by the fruit that it bears. It would be a rare and an unfortunate situation for someone to say and condemn somebody because of a situation, whether you believe they should have paid for it or not. The bottom line is the debt was paid, and a person offers themselves, and that is what I offer myself to you. So in terms of somebody saying, well, aren't you biased or prejudiced? Absolutely not. I have sisters, I have nieces, okay? I have daughters, I have granddaughters. My concern for them is the same for every man and woman in this county, and I make no apologies about it.
Thank you so much. Ariane, what makes you qualified for the office of county prosecutor?
Sound okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you, sir. In terms of my qualifications, outside of my spirit and my heart, I am a lifelong county resident, and I have devoted my entire professional career to being here, right here in Washtenaw County. When I first started out, I started working for the trial court, which was the Division of Community Corrections, and I worked down in the jail. And during that time, I learned a whole heck of a lot. Actually, one of my former coworkers, we started the court service liaison program together, and we would interview the offenders as they came into jail and do a risk and needs assessment. Some of you might know of it, it's called the COMPASS assessment. They still use it today. Well, I was one of the first folks to ever give a COMPASS assessment down in the jail. And that assessment is such that we would identify true needs to reduce recidivism. And I did that for 3.5 years. And during that time, we're like, well, that's kind of odd, you know, you went to law school. I was waiting for a job to open up at the county prosecutor's office because that's where I wanted to be, right? It was that opportunity that I saw that if I had the opportunity to have real change, maybe I wouldn't come into contact with the clients that I was serving down in the jail. Now, at that time, I was able to place folks in residential substance abuse treatment. Catholic Social Services was running their domestic violence. I was auditing that and making sure that people got into their programming. And I got to know a lot of the offenders, and that this 30-day program in jail was not even scratching the surface. And I felt like I was sending them back out into the community with maybe a scram tether and a hope and a prayer that we weren't going to see them back. They weren't healed at that time, and I understood the deficit, but I didn't know how to get from that point to so that the offender wasn't coming back. But I was very blessed, and I ended up at the county prosecutor's office just a couple of years later. And I will tell you that I probably have some atoning to do, because as a baby prosecutor, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I probably caused some harm. Part of that is because when you are a prosecutor, they do not teach you any of this stuff when you're brand new, when you're in law school, right? You think, oh, you're a lawyer, you know how to do all this stuff, you passed the bar. It's like that bear hunt, you know, the song that you sing to your kids, you can't go around it, you can't go over it, you gotta go through it. That's a lot like being a prosecutor. And it took years. But I had this really great supervisor at one point, and he said this, my second day, and I always kept this kind of close in my vest. He said, Ariane, if you do what you believe is in the interest of justice, you're gonna be okay. And I have had to hold on to that. But now I've had to answer for that. I didn't understand expungements in the beginning. I didn't understand the plea deals that we were all making. I didn't understand a lot of that. But as I grew as a prosecutor, I learned. Now I spent almost 7 years as the lead domestic violence prosecutor. And during that time, I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time developing on how to communicate with people who had been harmed by crime. Because unless that's happening consistently around you, in the beginning, it's uncomfortable and it's hard. And they have healing to do as well. And I realized I couldn't just be focused on what was happening on the other side of the podium. I had to take care of what was going on my side of the podium as well. So I had to be there on both sides. And then as I evolved and I went back into the general felony division, I thought, wow, my goodness. I didn't agree with all the office policies, but being in the prosecutor's office is a paramilitary organization. And so when I got that call from the city of Ann Arbor saying, Ariane, how would you like to run your own criminal division? Seemed like a pretty good idea to me. So now that I've been over at the city of Ann Arbor for over 2 years, I've had the opportunity to do city prosecution. And one of those amazing, and I can give you an example of something we just did recently, that there was a young lady who came to me and she had a whole bunch of minor in possession of alcohol charges. She had so many, they were misdemeanors. And when you initially look at the file, you're like, oh my goodness, she's 18 years old and she's got a drinking problem. We have to help this young lady. And she didn't want an attorney, so she was going to be pro per. And I had the opportunity to take some time and speak with her at the end of the docket. And she basically told me, listen lady, I don't have a drinking problem. I have a nicotine problem. She said, I get the alcohol and I sell it to my friends so I can buy the Juul nicotine. She goes, but don't worry, it's vaping, it's not bad for you. The mom in me was like, no. But I had to take a minute and I said, okay. Was it really worth this young lady having like 6 or 7 misdemeanors for possession of alcohol? She doesn't have a drinking problem. Like what really was this, what were we gonna do with her? And so I said, I'll make you a deal. This is gonna be our prosecutorial deal. This is an official offer. Like most teenagers, she also had her cell phone kind of attached to her person. And I said, if you do some research, now of course, if you find out that vaping is good for you, I doubt you will, but if you do, you can make me a 30-second public service announcement about why vaping is good. I have a feeling you're gonna find out information to the contrary, and you can make me a public service announcement for 30 seconds about why vaping is bad. Okay, that sounds pretty good. So we're gonna do 5 hours of community service and you're gonna go down to pick up your free smoking cessation packet, take a picture of yourself with it, show it to me, and then I'm gonna dismiss your cases. I felt like that was an appropriate resolution, but what it was time. I had time to spend with this young lady. That is something that the prosecutor's office, the way it's currently structured, they don't always have. I do have a plan for that and how we can restructure so that every case is given that amount of time and attention. Even something that we might look at in the community as, this is de minimis, right? This is a little case, that's small potatoes. You should focus on the armed robbery. But you know what? You focus on the young lady who's got the nicotine issue now. She doesn't get to have the friends to sell the alcohol to, what's she gonna do next? She's gonna steal. Then she ends up on probation. And then she's doing other things that she shouldn't be doing and she gets in trouble again. And then there's the vicious circle. And then she can't apply for financial aid when she wants to go to college. That is the institutional cycle that can hold our children back. So we have that opportunity, and that's what I've been doing. I think that's what makes me qualified, is I'm willing to work with our community partners and work outside the box.
Thank you so much. Quickly, so we can move along here. I'm going to ask you what makes you qualified for the office of county prosecutor, and you go back and come in. We want to do this quickly because we want to get this rolling.
All right, well, Nate, you're asking a bunch of lawyers to not talk a lot, so I don't know if that's going to be.
Get to the point.
So look, I believe that I am uniquely qualified to perform the office of prosecuting attorney. I am not a career prosecutor. I did not come up through the current system. I am somebody that is coming in from the outside and am committed to reform. At the same time, I have relevant experience that I think will allowed me to do the job on day one. My current job, I work as senior legal counsel at the city of Detroit. In that capacity, I oversee thousands of public interest litigation cases. We are suing the opioid industry, holding them accountable for the damage that they have done to our community. We are suing banks and slumlords who maintain properties in the city of Detroit in a way that harms children with healing lead paint. We are standing up on behalf of Detroit kids seeking to vindicate their right to literacy. That's the job of the elected prosecutor, is managing these thousands of cases, managing the lawyers that work for them. That is a job that I do now. I know how to do it. I will be ready on day one to run the office. But beyond that, I gotta say, I have stood up my whole life, right, trying to do what's right for the community. I have been in public service and I dedicate a lot of my time to pro bono work. I work as an environmental lawyer trying to hold corporations accountable for the damage they've done to our community. I recently had the great honor of working in the Michigan Supreme Court on behalf of the American Civil Liberties Union, the League of Women Voters, and the American Association of University Women to stand up for paid sick leave and earned sick time. Now you might say, oh, but you're not a prosecutor. You haven't spent your time trying to put people behind bars. You're not ready to do what it takes to keep the community safe. I think that's the wrong way of looking at this. We shouldn't have these silos. What we should want in a prosecutor is somebody that recognizes how the criminal justice system affects literally everything else we do. When we put somebody through the criminal justice system, when we're holding somebody on cash bail and they lose their job, well then they lose their housing too. Well then their kids have to switch schools because they moved. Well then they lose 6 months of academic growth on average, right? These are the kinds of perspectives, this is the kind of experience I think we should want in somebody that is trying to reform the prosecutor's office. It's not just somebody that's been a career prosecutor, that's been doing this same thing their entire life. It's somebody that brings a breadth of other experiences. The other thing that I'll just highlight really quickly is I am a litigator. I have litigated at every level of court in the state of Michigan and in the United States, including in the United States Supreme Court. I've represented clients ranging from victims of domestic violence to victims of consumer fraud, kids with special needs. I've represented criminal defendants pro bono successfully. So I have the breadth of litigation experience to substantively step in and do the job on day one. But look, if you want somebody that can build systems, if you want somebody that understands how our criminal justice system interacts with every other thing that we are doing in this society to perpetuate injustice, I'm your guy. If you want somebody that's been a career prosecutor, I'm not. So that's the choice that I bring to voters, and I hope to have your vote in August.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to qualifications, it starts with the heart, the human heart, a desire to serve. I told you that I fought my way through a penitentiary for 10 years. A desire to serve and help people that have been wronged is ingrained in my fiber. So much so that when I left the penitentiary and regained my license, I wrote a book dedicated to the innocent men and women in the penitentiary, trying to help them find hope, ladies and gentlemen, to find hope and not to give up on their future. It's very easy to ignore a throwaway populace, ladies and gentlemen, to ignore them. Lock them up and throw away the key. That is exactly wrong. People will come back out in society. And it's not about being a bleeding heart. It's not about being some ultra-liberal or progressive. It's about doing what is right. I have a moral fiber in me that will let me stand up for what I know is right, regardless of the consequences. That moral fiber has me standing in front of you right now because I know it is the right and just thing to do. In terms of recidivism, in terms of understanding what it's like to come out, I want people to be able to reintegrate. So in addition to my qualifications, my administrative qualifications, my vast trial experience in all aspects of the law, I offer you an opportunity to elect someone who not only understands the system intimately from the outside in, but the inside out. I think it is a rare opportunity for you to elect someone who knows the system totally, not academically, but who has actually lived it and come back from it. What a great symbol for people coming out of the penitentiary. What a great symbol for people who are unemployed. What a great symbol for people who are fighting drug addiction and dependency. What a great symbol for people who are dealing with abusive relationships. What a great symbol for them to know that there is hope in the future for them. I'm not ashamed of the gospel of God in Jesus Christ, and I believe Jeremiah 29:11. I know the thoughts I think towards you, say the Lord. Thoughts of peace and not evil, to give you a future to hope and to expect to them. And I hope to be your next prosecutor.
Thank you. I want to go back to Eli. I want to talk about experience. You talked about experience. Hugo Mack talked about experience. Aaron talked about experience, but we want to talk about the experience as a prosecutor. You have tried cases as attorney, but you don't have an idea of when it comes to the prosecutor office of how it's run, or you have not tried a case as a prosecutor. So my question to you when it comes to experience, because a lot of times we as voters, we want someone that has the experience. So my question to you, if you don't have that experience, why would the voters trust your agenda as the next prosecutor for Washtenaw County?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. There's a couple of things. Number one, I've never said I'm a prosecutor. I'm coming at this from a reform perspective. And I think that if you really want to change the office that we currently have, you want somebody that did not come up through that office. You want somebody that did not come through that system, okay? So, and I mentioned this in my previous statement, but I am actually doing the job now that is most similar to the actual job of the elected prosecutor. I manage a caseload of thousands of cases. I manage lawyers. I do budgets. I have brought in grants for the city of Detroit for mental health programs in schools for environmental remediation and to ensure that environmental injustice is solved in Southwest Detroit. Tens of millions of dollars that I've worked with community partners to do this, right? So beyond the managerial capacity and overseeing thousands of cases and thousands of lawyers, I have brought resources to bear, which is something that I want to do as prosecutor, right? Now, the other thing about this is, I think that you should campaign as you should go. And what I represent in this campaign is a clean break from the current prosecutor's office and from what the policies that we have been following in this country for decades, which have quite frankly failed us, right? And so I'm the only candidate on this stage, and I'm proud to have done this, to have taken the clean campaign pledge, right? In which I promise, A, no personal attacks, and you haven't heard any personal attacks on my opponents from me, and you won't, right? B, we're not taking money from corporate PACs. C, we are not taking money from the cash bail industry, right? Which is an industry that profiteers from our system of injustice that has been perpetuated for far too long. And D, and this is the important thing, I'm not taking money from current employees of the prosecutor's office. Because when I come in there, I am coming in there with a totally clean slate. I don't want to be beholden to anybody. I want to be able to look at it with new eyes, to organize the office the way that I want to, the way that the voters elected me to do, without being beholden to anybody. I didn't make this up. This is a pledge that is best practice nationwide in district attorney and county prosecutors races when there is an open seat. The two progressive candidates in San Francisco, Jessa Bodine and Leif Dowdge, took the exact same pledge. So when I say I'm going to bring change to the prosecutor's office, you can trust me, because I didn't come up through that office, because I'm not being funded by that office, and because I have the experience necessary to build systems, to bring in the resources to do it, and to manage the thousands of cases that we'll be seeing in the Washtenaw County Prosecutor's Office on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about management. Now, during my time at the county prosecutor's office, I had the opportunity to write Department of Justice grants for the domestic violence unit. That started off very big in the beginning. It was the Jody money. We're talking about over $10 million. I have experience doing that as well. And I did that throughout my tenure as your domestic violence prosecutor. But let's talk more about managing. My question, how much longer does it take to prep a 1-count misdemeanor domestic violence trial versus a 15-count uttering and publishing? If you don't know the crimes and you don't know what it takes to put in for each trial, how can you manage the people who need to do it? You have to know. What are you going to do when the cops call in the middle of the night and they say, this police officer just did X, we need help? They will call you. And if they don't, you have a brand new assistant who has been on the job for 2 years or 2 months, and they will say, I don't know, police officer, let me call my boss. Boss, so-and-so just killed so-and-so. They've turned the scene over to us. What are you going to do? You can't say, I manage systems and hang up. You have to give them advice. You have to know who their conflict firm is. You have to know what you were doing on the scene. This is not one of those jobs that you can walk into and say, I will lead by systems. I will lead by governing. You have to know how to do this. As the chief law enforcement officer, not just of the county, it is my responsibility, and it will be my responsibility come 2021, that you have to make sure that your assistants know what they are doing. You have to show up in court. You have to sit second chair with them when they're doing their first homicide. You have to be there to know that the mission of the office is going the right way. Now, if you believe that someone is going to be defined by their boss that they had years ago, and that they can't change, and that they have to be their boss, well then Ellie's probably your dude. But I can tell you that we should not be defined by our former bosses, 1, and 2, you have to have the spirit and the ingenuity to go forward, but do it within the confines of the law. I am not going to tell you anything to make you just feel good. I will tell you what's lawful, and I will tell you what is correct to do under the courtroom, and I'm going to follow those to a tenet. But unless you practice in those, and unless you have been practicing in those, you can't just walk into it. It's not something that you read. It's something that I've been living for years.
Yes, I have a comment. First of all, in terms of taking money from members of the prosecutor's staff, I don't think I'll have that problem. Okay, from corporate entities, I won't have that problem. We've got enough problem getting $12.50 from donations. That's my problem, okay? So the problem that Eli's talking about, I doubt I will have that problem. 40 years. 40 years. 40 years, the children of Israel in the desert. 40-year Moses in the desert before bringing back to save the children of Israel. A lot can happen in 40 years. 40 years I've been involved with the criminal justice system. 40 years. Yes, some of that fighting for justice, filing dozens of federal lawsuits from inside the penitentiary for staff corruption, hundreds of grievances inside the penitentiary for staff corruption. It has been my fiber. I understand the 3 o'clock call in the morning. I have the experience from juvenile court all the way to first-degree murder cases and the administration thereof to deal with that 3 o'clock call. I've got the ability, the innate training, the experience, the unquestioned trial experience to deal with that call. So when that 3 o'clock call comes in the morning, it's not a matter of me trying to manage a budget. It's a matter of me making a split-section appropriate decision for the best interest of you, the people, the best interest of the police officers involved, and the best interest of my community, and that is exactly what I intend to do.
Thank you, sir. Come back to you. This question was asked from quite a few people. I'll ask. So I would like to ask you, working in the prosecutor office for as long as you have, for some time now, have you ever addressed the injustice and the discrimination that goes on in the courtroom as a prosecutor? Have you ever addressed any of those issues? Have you ever ran into any of those issues, seen any of those issues, experienced any of those issues? Have you ever addressed them?
I think the super quick answer, and for any of the other trial attorneys, and I can kind of peep some of you out, it starts with the people would like to think and excuse juror number, fill in the blank. One of the privileges that I've had over the years is to conduct a great number of jury trials. And I think the best prosecutors have always realized that they are the best defense attorneys at the same time. So when selecting a jury of your peers going forward, it is important that you have a unbiased jury. That they are going to decide the facts and circumstances of the case based on the letter of the law and the evidence you present and nothing more. So there's this very nosy type of procedure called voir dire. And in that process, you have to ask a lot of questions. Now, no one's going to raise their hand and say, you know, like, I'm the closet racist, or like, you know, I'm going to vote guilty no matter what because I just want somebody to suffer. Like, they're not going to say that, but there's an art to it. You have to figure out that. So there is that. That is something that on a weekly, or sometimes based on my supervisor, more than once a week jury trial that I went through throughout my entire career, which was to the best of my ability, rid the courtroom of injustice. However, something to be cognizant of is that there's a section in a pre-sentence investigation. Now, just to kind of give everybody a little bit of information, most prosecutors are not present at sentencing. They're not there. Now, in felony court, they're present, and in the domestic violence unit or adult court, they're present. But for all the other crimes, prosecutors are not present. We have the same number of prosecutors that we've had for years. We've added 6 specialty courts. We haven't added a prosecutor. So there's an opportunity for 2 more assignments a week for each court for everyone to go out and participate. So we have to break somewhere, so they don't go to sentencings. But in felony court, and for some of the district courts, they provide a pre-sentence investigation. And in that part, there's something called the agent's description of the offense. And there's another part that talks about the background of the defendant. And I was up north not too long ago, higher up in Michigan, and I was teaching at the Prosecutors Association. And so I do that on a regular basis, is that I teach prosecutors around the state how to equitably be a prosecutor and how to do things the right way. And the young lady said to me, I never read that part. Excuse me? What do you mean? She's like, oh, I never read that part, it doesn't matter. She said, I just get down to the scoring part and I make sure that the scoring is all accurate, but I never read about the background of the defendant. It doesn't matter anyways. So, took the opportunity at that time after I decided I wasn't going to scream at her. I needed to have a moment, right? And I said, it absolutely matters. How that person ended up in the chair on the other side of the podium matters. Because if it doesn't matter to you, then to whom? You are here on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan. You are here so that this person's experience is going to, A, protect the community and be a voice for the victim, but also to make sure that there is procedural justice and that this person has the resources so that they don't have to come back. And if you don't know where they're coming from and what their needs are, how can you help them not come back? And she said, well, that's the job of the defense attorney. I said, young lady, you do not need to be a prosecutor, because the best prosecutors are the best defense attorneys. We have to be the first line of defense. When we read that initial case file, when we are training the police, when we are having those 3 a.m. phone conversations as to what to do next with your police, it is your responsibility as as a prosecutor, it is your responsibility to make sure that there is procedural justice and that there is justice for everyone involved. And you know, that young lady, we had a conversation not too long ago, she's now reading at least, had also a conversation with her boss. She probably has some other training to go to as well.
I want to go back to you, as I asked Ariane in regards, have she addressed these issues of injustice? My question to you, if you are elected as the next prosecutor, how do you plan on fixing the problem of the injustice that goes on in the courtroom here in Washtenaw County? It's a lot when it comes down, when I say about injustice, let's talk about racism, let's talk about people you're looking at, maybe as your religious background, sexual orientation, color of your skin, that goes on in Washtenaw County courtroom, and it is real, and you can't deny that. So my thing is, those are one of the issues that need to be addressed, and as Ariane said, those are a lot of things that she, addressed, saw, and dealt with those things. How do you plan on, if you're elected, to really fix that problem? Because that's a serious problem.
Absolutely. And look, I've got, so when I declared my candidacy, I had a 13-point plan for fixing the prosecutor's office. It's now 15 points. So I encourage you all to, and it's probably going to expand by more as I talk to people and as I learn and get ideas from elsewhere. So I have comprehensive plans to deal with all this stuff, but I'm just going to talk about a few of them. You can read the full plan on my website, eli2020.com. We have, and I referenced this earlier, we have systemic disparities in our justice system here in Washtenaw County. And for far too long, these have been hidden in a black box, right? There is no transparency that is shown on them, and the prosecutor's office systemically is making no effort to address it. This is, again, not me saying it. This is what the prosecutor, the chief assistant prosecutor himself said in a major national publication. We don't ever take a look on that. So, the first thing, one of the first things that I'm committed to doing when I'm prosecutor, right? And I like to take ideas from elsewhere. I like to take ideas that have worked elsewhere in the country. I'm going to tell you a story about the prosecutor in Milwaukee, because I do think it's important to read and get a national perspective on what is working elsewhere in the country. Prosecutor in Milwaukee is elected, right? And he is seeing the same types of racial disparities in Milwaukee that we are seeing in our system in Washtenaw County. But he doesn't know what's driving it, because the prosecutor's office has not ever kept track of where the disparities are most pronounced, right? What kinds of crimes? What kinds of arrests? Where are you seeing disparities in sentencing and charging decisions between races, right? And so he opens up the prosecutor's office's files, and I want to say this is sort of revolutionary, because prosecutor's offices are way too often hidden from the general public. And he says, I'm going to partner with a third-party research institution. I'm going to be totally transparent, and I want them to come in and I want them to identify, from arrests to charging, to sentencing, to the terms of probation that this prosecutor's office is imposing on people, where the racial disparities are most pronounced, right? And they come back, they do this study, they look at all the files, and they say, guess what? It's drug paraphernalia crimes. Now, for those of you that don't know, drug paraphernalia crimes are basically, you got something that can hold drugs, right? But it's not the drugs itself. And it's a relatively unserious offense. And so the prosecutor in Milwaukee says, I'm not charging these, right? The disparities are too pronounced. Justice is not being done when we are seeing such disparate impact in these kinds of charging decisions, and in the arrest and in the probationary terms and everything like that. Now, I don't know what we're going to find here. I do know that it's far past time that we stop burying our head in the sand about what is going on in Washtenaw County.
Yeah.
So I am committed to partnering with a third-party research, maybe an institution of higher learning that we have like right down the street here. We got University of Michigan, we got Eastern Michigan University in our backyard. We're going to open up the prosecutor's office files, and we are going to get to the bottom of this. It's not going to be based on a hunch. It's not going to be based on anecdotes. It's going to be based on data. What is driving the racial disparities in this system and in the courtroom? Now, I have my own hunch. I bet driving with a suspended license is one of them, right? But we don't know, because we've never made any systemic effort to track it. And to me, that is unacceptable, and it's going to end when I'm prosecutor.
Thank you.
I understand it's important to open the books, but we have to do so lawfully, folks. CJIS, that governs our case files, right, and our access to lien network, that's something that's real. And paraphernalia isn't a state charge.
I didn't say it
So
was.
I'm just saying if that's something that we are looking at in terms of, you know, Washtenaw County charges all these paraphernalias. I know, mentioned that not today, but I watched your videos. We talked about all we do is charge paraphernalia and people are in jail on paraphernalia. There's not a state charge for that. You can go out to the townships and have that charge. It's not even a charge in the city of Ann Arbor. But let's talk about sentencing. The prosecutors don't impose sentences. There's a very important judicial race coming up in 2020. Prosecutors do not impose bonds. They do not set your bond. The magistrates do, the judges do. So if you are concerned about these issues and you are unhappy with the current system, this is a judge issue. You need to pay attention as to who you are putting in office in 2020. Pay very, very close attention. I'm almost done. And in terms of righting those injustices, the city of Ann Arbor will be hosting our first ever as a county warrant day on December the 16th. This warrant day, for those who do not have a violent domestic assault pending warrant out of the city of Ann Arbor, right now there's about 2,600 open bench warrants. You'll have the opportunity to come in, turn yourself in on your warrant, you check into the clerk's office, and we will run this a lot like the street outreach court. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, you'll have the opportunity to come in front of the judge and get assigned an attorney if you'd like one, or not, you can work with your assigned prosecutor, and we will be lining the hall of 15th District Court with all of our service providers. And we have commitments from Michigan Works and Safe House Center, and I could go on, but there'll be more information coming out on Facebook. The city has joined, and get this, the county prosecutor's office has agreed to do this. Mackie's letting me take a lead on this, and we are going to be working on resolving cases. So if you are without funds or you are in need of services, we can work on that in terms of resolution to your criminal case. So if you present that you have a clear license, but you still have a driving with license suspended ticket in Ann Arbor, your ticket gets dismissed. The goal is to get everyone licensed again. If you're presenting and you have fines and court costs for your old probation violations that you can't pay back for the court, you can meet with your community service provider and you can get credit. The court decided they will give you credit for what you have done with your community service provider to pay off your court costs, your fines and cost fees. This is a day for our community to get out from DWLS. It is not a crime I'm interested in prosecuting. 95% or more are failure to comply with judgment. That means somebody got a ticket, they couldn't pay for their ticket, and so their license got suspended. And they get suspended and suspended and suspended and suspended, and that is injustice. There are a few people, right, who do get suspended because they have, hit and killed somebody with a car, because they are a drunk driver. They can get suspended, right? There are repercussions for killing somebody with your car or being a drunk driver. But for the people who simply can't afford to pay and is an inability to pay, we have to right that injustice. And as a prosecutor, that's not something I'm interested in continuing.
Real quick, we're about
Hey, I never said drug paraphernalia crimes were driving the disparities in Washtenaw County. I said that they found in Milwaukee. So that's just a point of factual clarification. And I never said in any of my videotaped appearances, and I urge you all to watch them because they sound pretty good, that drug paraphernalia crimes were driving racial disparities here in Washtenaw County. B, more fundamentally, I 100% agree that we need to pay really close attention to our judicial races. These are absolutely crucial. But that shouldn't be an excuse to wash our hands of the three candidates standing on stage and just say, well, it's the judge that makes those decisions, right? I hope we're going to get a chance to talk about bonding, because I think this is one of the major points of difference between myself and at least one of the candidates. But we talk about sentencing, and I'm well aware that the judges do the sentencing. I think most people are aware of that. But here's the other fact of the matter. If you're looking at sentences, 97% of cases are disposed of through a plea bargain, right? So the prosecutor is basically negotiating a deal with the defendant, along with a recommended sentence. So to say the prosecutor doesn't have any say on that is just not right. And I am not somebody that is going to wash my hands of the responsibility and slough it off on judges.
Well, I hope someone's keeping track of the time everybody's allowed to talk, because I feel like I'm waiting in the wings here. I certainly hope I'm afforded some opportunity to talk myself. First of all,
Hold the mic
I'd
closer, sir.
like to take a pause to remember Elijah Cummings, great violence justice. One of the most profound things I heard Elijah Cummings say is that the weight of history is upon us. That applies to Washington, D.C., and it applies to Washtenaw County. You, the citizens of this county, the voters, the electorate, you have the weight of history upon you. Let me be very specific and not abstract about what the problem is. When I was coming up within our public schools, I was coming out of an era that they call tracking. And anybody in my age group understands tracking. That is where, from kindergarten, you were tracked as to what supposedly was the best outcome of your education. Disproportionately, African American youth were tracked in areas working with your hands, some kind of a laborer, some kind of a factory worker, all noble professions, but definitively tracked away from college prep and higher education. That is tracking. The problem we have, and I see it so clearly, from an early age, we are tracking demographics in our society into a second-class citizenship in terms of crime. Let's talk about juveniles. Please, let's talk about juveniles. Why is it that 70% of the people in juvenile court are African-American kids? Why is that? Why is that? You see, when that happens, we get people accustomed to the police. We get people accustomed to being in courts. We get people accustomed to expect someone telling them what to do and marshaling them. You see? It is something that is so ubiquitous, it is almost like air. In the vestiges of slavery, which we are still fighting in this country, it is almost accepted that certain people will end up certain ways, because the expectations of them are low and the resources for them to do anything better are even lower. So the first thing we've got to do, and I'm going to be very candid about this, if we've got, let's say, 2 young kids in one part of the county, little Timothy and Susan, paintballing, soaping windows, apprehended by the police, given a stern warning, go home to your parents, don't ever let this happen again. When in another part of the county, we've got little Kadisha and Kwame doing the exact same thing, but end up on the juvenile court docket. We have to start to addressing that cultural norm, and it starts with the police. And I have told every law enforcement agency, and I'm going to say it again in this county, and I'm glad the sheriff is here with us, I've told him too, that we are going to treat cases fairly. We're going to work with the police in fairness. Police need to be educated. Racism is real. The vestiges of slavery is real. Disadvantage is real. Economic empowerment is real. Individuals not being able to climb up. It's one thing to tell somebody, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, when that person doesn't have any shoes. So we have got to start addressing that from the top. So we're going to address that when we deal with juveniles all the way up. My office is going to look at every case that comes through that juvenile court system to find out, are we despairing people? Are there certain communities that we're over-policing? And in terms of adults, we're going to give people an opportunity and incentive. I've made it quite clear. We have 2 major problems in this county. One, gun violence, and the other, drugs. I made it quite clear. When I take office, I make an announcement. If you've got a gun, Cousin Pookie gave it to me, I found it by the railroad, I'm scared, don't know what to do with it, I'm going to give you a chance to hand that in. If that can save one life, is there one person in here that tells me that's a bad idea? In terms of opioid dealers, in terms of crack cocaine dealers, people who purvey in our community and ruin our future, particularly in the African American community, you've got 30 days to do one of two things. Close down your operation, clean it up, or get out of my county. Make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen. My resolve is very firm on this. So that's how we begin to address racism and inequity. We start having people respect themselves as youth and not get them indoctrinated into the system. And then we tell people you're going to be treated fairly, but you're going to be respected, and you're going to be expected to honor the law. And that's exactly what I intend to do.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. Let me go back to Ariane. Let's talk cash bail. Your opponent right next to you. His perspective on cash bail is that if he becomes the next prosecutor, he would like to do away with cash bail when it comes down to danger. What is your perspective?
He needs to get a job in the legislature because that is not up to him. The prosecutors make a written bond recommendation for crimes of interpersonal violence or domestic violence crimes. Other than that, they don't attend arraignments unless it's a very serious offense, something like a murder, a sexual assault, a crime against an elderly person, or somebody maybe who is on parole. There is a court rule. I'm gonna go kind of quick here. I need y'all to follow along with me. It is Michigan Court Rule, MCR 6.106, right? And that court rule defines how bail in state court works. And there is an opportunity if the judge or magistrate feels that someone is a risk to the community, right, for danger, or that they are a flight risk, to set a cash bond. There's no prosecutor present. The magistrate actually makes that decision. Now, there are only a couple of ways that you can say, no bond, no bail. You're not going anywhere. That is if it is a CSC1, criminal sexual conduct, first degree, murder, somebody is on parole, or somebody is on bond for a violent felony already, and they commit another violent felony, and that's the allegation. Those are the instances where the magistrate can say no bond, okay? So if I am no criminal record, I've never done anything, and I'm gonna pick on you because you're standing up at the back. Hi, Ernie, how you doing? Okay, so if I walk up and I punch Ernie and I try to stab him and I get away and the police catch me because, you know, Sheriff's Department, they caught me, right? And I'm in front of the magistrate and I say, I'm going back to get Ernie. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna finish the job, right? I'm not on bond for a violent felony. I have no criminal record. I'm not on parole, right? It's not a CSC1. It's not a murder. Under the no cash bond syndrome, I walk. Now, you don't get to say as a prosecutor, you can say, I'm not gonna advocate for bonds on misdemeanor cases. You can say that. I think that is a totally appropriate thing to say. And I don't think that people should be in jail simply because they can't afford a bond. The people who should be in jail are the people who are a danger to our community. Who should be in jail. But I don't think that you can say in every circumstance that there should be no cash bail, because in that circumstance, I need a cash bail. Would you want me running out? Would Ernie want me running out saying, Ernie, I'm coming to get you. I'm coming right back after you. That's not actually how it works. So to actually have that where we're not going to have a cash bail system, then that law, that court rule needs to change. So that's just one of the things. Experience matters in this situation.
Yeah, so several points to respond to there, but before I do, I just want to take a step back, because, you know, we talk, we're all lawyers on this stage, and I think we use terms that, you know, maybe some people aren't necessarily familiar with. So what cash bond is, right? You are arrested for a crime. You are charged with a crime, right? And what the court says is, we will let you free before your trial, pending trial, you haven't been found guilty of anything yet, we are going to let you free if you come up with a certain amount of money out of your pocket, right? If you can't come up with that, you're going to be held in jail. Now, the inequities of that are apparent on its face. What that means is that somebody that is, accused of a very serious crime but happens to be wealthy, right? Somebody that shoots up a bunch of storefronts, as recently happened in this community but happens to be wealthy, is able to get out on cash bond because they or their family can afford it, even though they pose a threat. Whereas somebody that is poorer, and I'm going to use an example just because it's so ludicrous from down the road in Wayne County, riding a bicycle on a sidewalk, held on $200 cash bond, you can spend a week in jail simply because you can't afford to pay your way out. Now, this isn't just about the unfairness. This has cascading consequences. Because when you are held in jail on cash bond, a working class person, a poorer person, the best research shows that within 3 days, they're likely to lose their job. And then they lose their houses. And then their kids may have to move and switch schools. And by the time they do get out, and again, this is backed up by research, they are more likely to commit crimes of desperation than they would have been if they had been released in the first place. So I am an opponent of cash bond from a moral perspective, from a public safety perspective. Now, as to the question of what we can do. Again, of course, it's the magistrates that set bond. That's true across the country, right? But across the country, too, you have seen prosecutors come in and say, we are not seeking bond for this category of offenses, or at all. And the judges tend to listen. And they tend not to impose cash bond because you're only there in the first place because the prosecutor's moving ahead with charges. If the prosecutor wasn't doing that, there would be no occasion to hold you in jail in the first place. This is true in cities like Philadelphia, where the prosecutor traditionally participated in the bond hearing. It's also true, by the way, in cities like Chicago, right? Where the state's attorney's office there, much like here, had not typically participated in the bond hearing, but the new DA came in and she said, I am just telling the court right now, we don't want cash bond for a whole host of offenses. They stopped imposing it, and the crime actually fell, right? So I reject the idea that we can do nothing as the prosecutor, that we have to continue to perpetuate this morally inequitable and counterproductive system just because ultimately it's the magistrate's discretion to do it. I realize that. But what I'm saying is we're going to advocate for no cash bond. We're going to advocate to hold people based on whether they pose a threat and to not hold people if they don't. Now, the court rule area I mentioned. I'm familiar with the court rule. A couple of things. Number one, it's not as though cash bail is the only option. I forget which subsection it is, but it's right near the top. And it says, even before it talks about cash bail, it says you can be released on an unsecured bond. What an unsecured bond is the court says, you're going to go free. We're going to let you free. We don't want you to commit any crimes while you're out. We don't want you to skip town, right? And if you do, and you come back within the court system, then you're going to owe the money. But you see, it keeps that incentive to show up, to stay on the straight and narrow, but it eliminates that incentive, or that eliminates the inequity that comes with having to dig money out of your pocket. Maybe take out a loan, having family members scrape up money for you, go to the predatory cash bond industry, which is going to charge you 10% and trap you in a cycle of poverty. To me, that's much more just. That's what Washington, D.C. tends to use in their system, right? They got rid of cash bail in 1992 when George Herbert Walker Bush was president. The sky didn't fall, well, the sky fell in D.C. for other reasons, but the sky didn't fall in D.C. for that reason. People aren't committing crimes in any more numbers while they're out. People are still showing up for court. It's been a success. New Jersey just got rid of it. I can go on and on. But I want to close by saying this. Ariane mentioned the idea that, was it Ernie? Yeah, okay. So Ernie tries to stab somebody, right?
No,
What?
she stabbed him.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. So Ariane stabbed Ernie. Oh, okay, well, right. Sorry. Yeah. My bad. So Ariane stabs Ernie, right? It is almost stabbed him, right? Attempted murder, something. All right. Well, I'm using your fact pattern, so feel free to correct me as I'm going on. But this is a really serious crime, right? But think about what the cash bail system imposes there. That doesn't say that, Ariane has to be held. It says that Ariane has to be held if she doesn't have money. If she's wealthy, she's going right back on the street if she can afford to buy her way out. So a more just and equitable system than cash bail is applying the same standards to everybody. That also protects public safety. And I'm aware of the court rules, and I think 6.106 subsection D, so dive into the weeds here, actually gives the judge some discretion to impose conditions which will ensure that people, poor or wealthy, aren't just released into the community, and it's equitable across wealth gaps, right? But look, if I'm wrong about that, we'll litigate it, but we're not going to let people out that pose a threat to the community. I realize the number one job is public safety. But fundamentally, we shouldn't be making this decision. My final point, we shouldn't be making these decisions and these policy judgments based on the worst possible scenario, right? That's what we've been doing with criminal justice for way too long. You say, well, what about the attempted murders? What about this? What about that? Those are the exceptions. And of course, I want to make clear, we're going to hold those people. We're going to make sure those people don't get back on the street. But if you look at the number of offenses for which people are being held on cash bail in the county jail, only 2 out of the top 10 felonies are violent crimes. You got stuff like possession of drugs, but that's not violent. Only 2 of the top 10 misdemeanors are violent crimes. So let's not continue down this same error that I think we've been going down for the past several decades of letting the fear of the exceptional circumstance, which again, I want to make clear, we're holding that person. The fear of the exceptional circumstance drive an inequitable policy that is hurting people, that is hurting families, that is counterproductive, and harms public safety. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
In terms of cash bail, let me just tell you, I'm 65 years old. Medicare, Medicaid, Humana, people calling me, knocking on my door all the time. Can't get outside without somebody trying to put something on me. I am too old and too seasoned not to be straightforward and blunt about where I'm coming from. The way I address the issue of cash bail is with practicalities. And that's what the people of this county deserve, practicalities. One way, when I'm prosecutor, the charges will be accurate. There will be no overcharging. That's the first thing. That's the first thing. Because if you have a person that is overcharged, that exponentially raises the amount of money and resource they have to expend. That's the first thing. The second thing is, the purpose of the bail and bond is really twofold. To assure a person's presence in a trial, and there not be any kind of witness intimidation or harassment. If we can reasonably assure the person will show up and there's not going to be any intimidation or harassment, then that person has got a strong case in terms of release. Now, in terms of incarcerating individuals, we need to understand, when we incarcerate someone, we take them out of society. If that person is a breadwinner, we eliminate their ability to make money and support their family. If that person is a community leader, if that person is a male, particularly an African-American male in our community, in our society, that is one less role model that people see. So we've got to be very, very sensitive to that. But I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of me being a prosecutor, my responsibility is to ensure the liberties and rights of everybody, the person that's accused, because they haven't been convicted of anything. So when we keep somebody in jail, that's a sentence. You can call it what you want. That is a sentence that someone is serving. And if they're vindicated, that's a sentence they serve needlessly. So my position is this. It is no sin trying to be poor, but it's no great honor either. It's a burden. And what I'm saying is, I don't want people burdened because of poverty, but as the prosecutor, the next prosecutor, I've got a responsibility to that person who allegedly has been harmed. I've got a responsibility, if that's you or your family, that you know that your prosecutor's concerned and there's not just a revolving door where anybody comes in and gets out. So in terms of cash bail, my attitude is this. If a person has got a resource they can put up instead of cash, that's fine. I believe in the expansive use of tethers, for example, tethers. So we can monitor where someone is. And if they violate that zone, if they go outside of the range of their home, then they can be picked up. Or they can be able to go to work, they can be able to go to church, they can be able to interact. And if we have report that they're somehow trying to mess with somebody or bother somebody, well, guess what? They're going back to jail. But I'm going to tell you this straight up. If somebody stabbed your Uncle Sid 5 times with a butcher knife, I'm going to be hard on them. I don't care how poor or rich they are. Because that is a matter of public safety. And that's my answer, my response.
Well, thank you. We have just a few more questions before we have closing statements from each candidate. Ariane, I want to come back to you. I want to ask you this question. If a jury renders a verdict, doesn't that verdict stand as the truth?
Loaded.
We gotta get to OJ, I'm gonna criminal jury or.
My goodness.
And it, for a criminal jury, yes, I mean, that is the only obligation, actual obligation that we have as citizens is to participate in jury service. So I think Abraham Lincoln said that. That is your only duty, is that when that jury service comes to you, you must participate in it. Now, we have some obligations and we have some things that we should do, but that is the only one, that is the only requirement of our citizenship, is that we are supposed to participate in jury service. So when the jury has spoken, I mean, absent appeal, of course, absent 6,500 motion from the prison, that's, the jury has spoken, yes.
Mr. Matt.
I want to be sure that I understand the question.
If a jury renders a verdict, doesn't that verdict stand as the truth?
If a jury renders a verdict in a court of competent jurisdiction, that makes that verdict enforceable as a rule of law. It does not make it true. There's a
Come on.
78% of the people in this country feel the jury in OJ got it wrong. All right? I am one of the percentages of people in this country who feel the jury in George Zimmerman got it wrong. I believe Trayvon Martin was flat out murdered, ladies and gentlemen. Flat out murdered. Let me tell you something. Circa, Money, Mississippi, 1955. A young African-American male from Chicago by the name of Emmett Till was visiting his relatives. Emmett Till was murdered, ladies and gentlemen. He was murdered. The police ultimately caught the people who they felt responsible. They put those men on trial. They happened to be Caucasians. A group of their peers acquitted them in less than 1 hour. Less than 1 hour. Less than a month later, those men gave an interview to a newspaper magazine where they said, yeah, we killed him. Yeah, we killed him. We got away with it. And when asked, why did you kill this man? Because he insulted a white woman. So in the eyes of the law, OJ, not guilty. In the eyes of the law, George Zimmerman, not guilty. In the eyes of the law, the 2 men who later confessed to murdering Emmett Till, not guilty. At one point in time, slavery was legal, but it was never right. So I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, because a verdict has been rendered, it makes it the force of law. And every lawyer will tell you, even a horrible verdict, even a horrible ruling by a court, an appellate court, has got to be upheld, because otherwise we devolve into anarchy. But it doesn't mean that we don't stop addressing injustice and moving for a better day to eliminate those wrong verdicts.
I'm going to mostly just join what Hugo said. But I do want to add just a little bit too. You know, the wrongful acquittals, right? That's something that under our constitutional order, honestly, you can't do anything about. Because double jeopardy prevents you from trying that person again. It's an important principle, but it's just something that ties our hands when the jury gets it wrong and acquits someone. Wrongful convictions, though. When the jury gets it wrong and they find somebody guilty, that's when you can do something about it still, right? Now, there's various procedures, right? I mean, there's appeal, there's habeas corpus. But what we're seeing in prosecutors' offices across the country, and the state AG's office here, Wayne County has one of these, is we have a wrongful conviction unit, where when there is evidence that is produced that suggests that a jury got it wrong with a guilty verdict, they take a look, they go back, and they will move to actually vacate that conviction, or at least, let the person free, end the sentence, right? If they decide that the jury verdict was not the truth. That's something I've committed to doing in Washtenaw County. I think it's important that, to the extent we can, we rectify the mistakes of the past. I think the worst thing that we can really do in the criminal justice system is wrongfully convict somebody. And it's something that I'm committed to addressing, because the truth is, juries do get it wrong. It's not always the truth.
Thank you. This question is for all three candidates. I would like you to give your input on when I had Gary Ann and Eli on the show, Heart to Hearts. I brought this question up to the both of them about public defenders. My question is, how can the prosecutor's office help the public defenders? We know that public defenders are government-paid, court-appointed attorneys. They are the cutting corners on a legal defense. And who this affects? The most poor people. When a public defender is overworked, underpaid, too many caseloads to handle, some of the public defenders may work an hour or maybe less than an hour on your case. Some public defenders don't even know who you are until you go to court that day. So my question to the candidates, it's been a problem. I would say between 95 to 98% of the time, they tell you because they're overworked, underpaid, caseload, just take a plea. Half of the time they have not looked at your case, so just take a plea. It's a big difference between a public defender and a paid attorney that's going to fight for you. My problem with this, the next prosecutor of the Washtenaw County office, how will you help the public defenders to become more effective? That when poor people walk in the courtroom, they have confidence that they're going to be treated fair and equal and not based on how much money they have in their pocket. Or if they don't have any money, they have to go to the public defender. How can that problem as the top prosecutor be addressed? And I want to start with Ariane.
I can tell you in the hundreds and hundreds of cases that I have tried, the Washtenaw County Public Defender's Office has, they've been a worthy adversary every time. I haven't had a public defender who simply didn't know their client or was phoning it in. They have been very excellent trial attorneys, so I will say that. I will also tell you that as often as you hear the public defenders are overworked and underpaid, is that the assistant prosecutors have the exact same contract that they negotiate together, largely with the Board of Commissioners, and that they have complete parity with each other. I will also tell you that while they just were able to hire a few more based on their some new grant money that came in to cover the arraignments, is that while there were only 13, I think at one point, public defenders and 27 line APAs, they weren't also representing every single case. The prosecutors were still in every court. They were out in 14B, which at that time, up until very recently, no public defenders, and in the 15th District Court in the city of Ann Arbor, no public defenders. That is a systemic issue. If you would like to see the public defenders have more time with their cases, the prosecutors have more time with their cases, you get what you pay for. When they have opportunities for the Board of Commissioners to stand and say, we want to fund the criminal justice community, you need to be a voice. That entire office, they are some of the lowest paid prosecutors and public defenders in Washtenaw County, with one of the most expensive places to live, right? In the state of Michigan, are one of the lowest paid in the state of Michigan. know, it's the truth for both of them. And so as an elected prosecutor, I would support that there would be additional staff to both offices, so that we have that time that I talked about earlier. We would have time to spend with each of our case files to give it that individual attention. That we would have time to spend with our clients, or our victims, or our police officers in preparation, to make sure that we are truly making the right decision. When we have the opportunity to fund the public defender's office, and to fund the prosecutor's office, and to fund training for both of those institutions, I would fully support that. And I hope, as your next elected prosecutor, that I'll have that opportunity to bring those systems and to bring that change to the county prosecutor's
How would
office.
you go about getting the funding for this? Because it's very important that you get the proper funding. So these.
They beat Wisconsin. Jonathan Taylor's Heisman candidacy takes a hit.
So how would you go about getting more funding?
I mean, I think we need to start and look at home first, right? So what can we do in the county? So going to the county board of commissioners, that's number one, but also grant funding. And criminal justice grants, typically, they come from the west and then they head east. So we gotta look at the funding that's available on the west coast right now, and then we can see that track, and we're like 2 to 3 years out from that being available in the Midwest, right? So we have to look at conviction integrity units. Those are being funded right now. We can look at federal funding. When those come, sometimes you're gonna get funding for indigent defense, like the public defender's office, prosecutors. Sometimes there's a law enforcement component that you'll have an investigative unit for those things. And if you're looking at diversion programs, they often come with federal funding, so I'm amenable to looking outside of the county for that. But I think we all need to recognize is that we have gotten the response from the criminal justice community based on what we've put into it. Most prosecutors, I'd say, work on average of 50 to 60 hours a week. They get paid for 37 and a half, no matter how many hours they work. There's no overtime in that job, and I believe the public defender's office is the same way. So if that's something that you are interested in, or something that you feel strongly about, then I encourage you to contact your representative for the county commission.
I'm gonna ask you this question. Did you have something to say?
So yeah, one of my favorite quotes about public defenders is that when the prosecutor stands up in court, they say that they represent the people. They do. So too do criminal defense attorneys, one person at a time. I am a big supporter of increased funding for our public defender's office. They get about half as much as the prosecutor's office currently in the budget. Arian's right. I mean, they're not handling every single case. There's paid attorneys handling some of them, but they still need more money. I'll advocate for that, in terms of getting grant funding, not just for this, not just for increasing the resources to our justice system directly, but I'm committed that the first non-lawyer position that I have open in the prosecutor's office is going to be filled by a grant writer, right? And we're not just going to seek money for the prosecutor's office, we're going to seek money with community organizations for the supports that we need to get people into services that will really rehabilitate them. We can talk about diversion, we can talk about problem-solving courts and drug addiction and mental health all we want, but the truth of the matter is this has been cut to the bone in our state, and we need to be looking at some of those federal grants, philanthropic grants, both nationally and the Kresge's, Kellogg's of the world at the state level. So that's one thing that I'm committed to doing. Potentially funding public defenders in a joint request with the prosecutor's office will be something that we'll do as well.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the next Washtenaw County Prosecutor, I have a responsibility to protect you. That also means your tax dollars, by the way. Washtenaw County is the 4th richest county in the entire state. That means 2 things. You make money and you're being taxed an awful lot. All right? My responsibility is to protect your funds as well. All right? When we talk about the public defender, I'm going to answer that question as a former public defender. It isn't the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog.
Amen.
For 12 years, 70% win ratio against the best prosecutors in the county in jury trials. 60% win ratio against the best prosecutors in the county in bench trials. That is not a boastful statement. That is a statement of a dedication, and it doesn't mean, let's say those stats were reversed the other way. It doesn't mean my dedication wasn't there. So I can only talk about myself as a public defender, my dedication. Many a times my late mother would say, son, you need to go to bed. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I gotta work on this voir dire. I gotta work on cross-examination. You have to feel that, ladies and gentlemen. You can't be paid for that. The compassion you have for people, those people that are charged, those people that say crimes have been committed against them, you've got to have a compassion for all of them. So specifically, I'm a very practical person. I can't really talk about expansives saying, well, if we get money for this, if we get money for that. It's wonderful to apply for money. But dealing with the system we have now, we've got to start when the kids are young. Remember I talked about the juvenile system? Remember I talked about how people get tracked into the system? If we can eliminate that tracking, we can decrease the people that are in the system, period. That is going to give more time for public defenders and prosecutors to devote to the cases at hand. So let's start addressing the problem from its genesis, all right? Not the omega, all right? Let's start looking at the alpha, not the omega, all right? So when we look at the alpha, one thing that I'm going to do as county prosecutor, we're going to stop that pipeline, that demographic pipeline that starts in juvenile court and tracks kids to adulthood. That's going to decrease the number of people we have to deal with. Now, in terms of when cases are coming, once again, what the prosecutor does in terms of the charge that is brought has got a big impact on what kind of case it is, how much time has got to be dedicated to it by the prosecutor and the defendant. When we have a fair charging system, ladies and gentlemen, when people know they're going to be given a fair shake by a person who knows what it's like to rebuild from nothing, when they know that, we can start having more faith and trust and integrity in the system. I believe in stats. I believe in transparency. But I also know that there are severe monetary constraints, and as the next prosecutor, I've got to deal within those constraints. So my dealing with public defenders is to have cases that are accurately charged. My dealing with the public defender is to be fair and honest and upfront where I'm coming from. So there's not going to be a lot of back talk, okay, when I'm the prosecuting attorney. It's going to be very straightforward, and people are going to know the true respect, but we're going to demand that they uphold the law also.
Thank you. Couple more questions, and then we're going to open up the floor for questions. These questions, people have just a couple more questions. I want to go back to Ariane. Ariane, what do you intend to do to address the mistrust between the African American community and the American courtroom here in Washtenaw County?
That's extremely heavy. So they're asking, what am I going to do for my community?
Exactly.
Okay. What am I going to do for my community, which is also the African American community, so that there is trust in the courtroom? I'm going to invite them to court. And I'm not saying that to be trite or to be silly, but I want them to see that there is change. There will be change in this administration, and that you'll be able to see in the way we pick our juries, in the way that we divert cases, in the way that we are interested in reading, for those who are convicted, the agent's description of the offense and the agent's description of the defendant's background, and making sure that that is accurate, that the prosecutor's office going forward is interested in healing. And that is something historically in this country that the prosecutor's office has not been interested at all. But you can ask around, ask any criminal defense attorney that I have ever tried a case with. It is never in it for the win. I don't go in it for the W. I go in it so that justice has been served and that the rules are procedurally followed. I had a criminal defense attorney, and I hadn't talked to him in ages. And he called not too long ago, and he said, oh, you know, I moved, I'm out of town now, but I just heard that you were running, and I wanted to wish you the best of luck. And I said, I do appreciate that. And I didn't really remember him at first, so I'm kind of talking to him on the phone and steadily trying to Google him, see if I could find a picture. And he says, I came in one day to your courtroom, you were in Judge Brown's courtroom, and you said, and he goes, and I was guns a-blazing. He goes, I was so angry. He said, I was coming in to file this motion, and I was gonna tell you about what your cops did, and I was gonna do all this stuff. And he was like, and I was gonna say, you better dismiss this case. And he said, I came around the corner and I introduced myself, and he said, oh, it's nice to meet you. I understand we got some supplemental information from the police. I'm prepared to dismiss your case today. And he said it was very anticlimactic because I really wanted to earn my keep. And I said, oh, okay, well, I didn't remember that case from anything. And he said about 2 weeks later, I got called in on a different case. And I was, same thing, I'm coming in, guns a-blazing, I'm gonna tell you about yourself and how I think that you guys got it wrong. And I walk in, hey, remember me from 2 weeks ago? Well, you're gonna dismiss this case. And he said, you looked at me, you gave me some case law and said if you'd like to file your motion, I'd be happy to file a response, but we don't have time to do this in the middle of the docket. There's about 200 people back there waiting. And once again, wind out of the sails. And he said, I went back to my office and I looked it up and you were right. He said, you had the opportunity, and he said, at each cross, he's like, to make a big deal out of it. And he said, Ariane, when I was wrong, you let me know in the interest of justice that I was wrong. When I was right, you graciously agreed and you did the right thing. It's never about the win. It's always about doing things the right way. And so I hope over time it's not gonna come easy because prosecutors have done a lot of harm and we have a lot of atonement to make up for. And there is a lot of distrust and that has come at the expense of so many. That has come at the expense of my granddad, who I never got to meet. That has come, but it is time for that to end. And so I would hope that given the time and given your trust, just a little bit now, you'll have a lot more later.
Trust must be earned. It starts at the top. What image does the chief law enforcement officer of this county display? Do they display an image of arrogance stuck in an ivory tower? Or are they out in the community talking to the people, them and their servants? Particularly communities that have been disadvantaged, over-policed, overcharged, and brutalized systemically since the inception of this country. When people see that the chief law enforcement officer is one of them, a person who in this rather unique situation with myself understands what it's like to be on the other side, understand what it's like to be on the inside looking out. When they know that the citizens, the voters in Washtenaw County are open-hearted enough to judge a person by their qualifications currently and not their past, that sends a vast message to everyone, So in terms of trust, as I've said 3 times in this conversation, in terms of my community, you are my community, but African American community is also my community. We need to display to that community that the prosecutor is not your enemy. The prosecutor is not merely an agent of the police. The prosecutor is a minister of justice. And I tell you, the greatest book that I've ever read says, my people perish for lack of knowledge and hope. When the prosecutor displays that hope, that fairness, when the prosecutor tells the people, the police are citizens, but very special citizens that we give the power of life and death to at an arm's length way. That is a lot of power. That is too much power for a bad person to have or a good person to want. When people know that police, and let's be very blunt about this, are going to be held to the same standards of everyone else, that's why I believe there should be a national standard for police officers throughout this entire nation. We have Miranda, which is a national standard. Everybody knows the playing field. People feel trusted and respected because they know what's expected of them and they know what is expected of the police. I further believe, in terms of public trust, every police officer in this county should have a body cam. Because as your next prosecutor, I want to know exactly what did happen. The camera won't lie. So, ladies and gentlemen, when people know they're going to be treated fairly, with the symbolism of justice and fairness and restoration, then I think we're going to go a mighty long way to establishing trust. And trust is the greatest crime prevention measure that we could ever have. Because people will know when they see crime, they're not going to be thrown under the bus. When I'm the next prosecuting attorney, no one is going to be thrown under the bus, and certainly no one is going to be left behind.
Free.
Thank you. We're going to wrap these questions up. I'm going to, time is catching up with us. So can you just give us 3 minutes real quick?
Sure. So, look, it starts by showing up. It starts by being present in the community. And as I've been campaigning, and even before that, just as an active member of the community, it's been striking that the prosecutor's office has largely been absent from a lot of community events. I want to compliment, I think that there's a natural distrust of law enforcement, but I want to compliment the sheriff because I think that he has really done a great job being present in the community, having the folks that work for him be present in the community. I think it's really changed how people view law enforcement, or at least the sheriff's office in this county. And that's a model, I would like to follow as prosecutor. You need to show up. The other thing you need to do is at least I think you can't just be seen as the hammer, right? The prosecutor's office should be seen as somebody that is standing up for justice and that wants to do right by the community. One thing that I really want to do as prosecutor is expand involvement in helping people get their criminal records expunged. We haven't talked too much about this today, but one of the vestiges of mass incarceration in this country is not what happens when you're behind bars. What happens when you get out, right? Or even if you never went to prison in the first place. You bear the stain of a record which prevents you in a lot of circumstances from getting work, from getting housing, from continuing your education, which by the way is incredibly counterproductive because those are the exact things that you need to do to make sure that somebody doesn't commit crimes again. So, I work on this stuff in my day job at the City of Detroit. I'm proud to have worked on the expungement legislation that is going on up in Lansing that is, assuming it's passed and signed by the governor, is going to make hundreds of thousands more people eligible for expungement of their records. And what I want to do as prosecutor is I'm going to steal a page from what we do at the City of Detroit. We have 2 lawyers working at the law department who full-time help people with expungement. I'm not going to commit to full-time staff because I know there's budgetary constraints in the prosecutor's office. But think about this. What if the prosecutor's office took an active role, a really active role, in helping people get their criminal records expunged, right? Think about the message that would send. We'd be saying, we're not just somebody that is trying to commit you to jail, to prison, right, to get something on this record. But if you do what's right, if you do everything that's expected to you, right, if you stay on the straight and narrow, we're going to help you get that charge off. The very office that got it on in the first place is going to help wipe your record clean so that you can fully participate in society. I think that would build a lot of trust. It's something I want to do as prosecutor.
Thank you.
On the issue of expungements, the prosecutor's office has been active, but I would encourage them to be more active in expungements in terms of education to the community. A lot of people have past convictions that they don't know that they're eligible for expungement, and the law is evolving, and the Senator Irwin has tons of bills in the hopper to bring those to fruition coming up that are going to make even more people eligible. I do believe there's a conflict of interest. We can't sit down with you and say, we'd be happy to help you with your expungement, tell me about your vulnerabilities, and then we get to court, and after we reviewed some files, we find out that there is still a victim, or there's still restitution owed, or that there is an inherent additional issue that we didn't know about. This is where the additional funding for the public defender's office comes in. And if the county wanted to fund 2 additional attorneys at the PD's office to do expungements full-time, I think that would be fantastic because that gives a fresh start to a lot of people in our community that need it. The prosecutor's office is not the office to be doing that. There is a conflict of interest that may even be grievable to the state bar. You can't be on both sides of the podium.
You build a conflict wall, right? I mean, this is what you do. This is what's done in Attorney General's offices when they're taking both sides of issues in county government offices all the time. You build a conflict wall, you have the people that are seeking expungements on one side, there is no sharing of information between the attorneys that are going to show up in court and maybe advocating for victims. The conflict wall solves any potential conflict of interest. It's a very simple thing that we can do.
Thank you, thank you. All right, this is going to be the last question, 3 minutes each person. So many more questions I wanted to ask, but time has got us. You know, I should have gave everybody 3 minutes per question. I let the attorneys talk. So this is the last question, and I want to start it off with Ariane. What does restorative justice mean to you, and how would that help the community?
Of course, you only gave me 3 minutes, Nate. Restorative justice to me means healing. And I come from a family of restorative justice, Slappies, we love it so much. My sister, who helped bring restorative justice to the circuit court and teaching that initially in the peacemaking court with Tim Connors. My mom, who was at the front of the court for almost 30 years, who did the domestic peacemaking. And I'm also a trained mediator. And I was certified, and I believe in the peacemaking circle, but I believe that restorative justice, especially for our youth, is a way to heal a community. Now, the majority of the people who are sentenced or convicted in our community, even if they go to jail or prison, are coming right back. They are coming right back, and if they don't feel welcome to come back in our community, that's going to be a problem. And in addition to that, the victims of our crime, most of them, and I can't tell you how many that I have worked with and supported through some of the most traumatic days of their lives and years of their lives. I still have a relationship with many of them today, do not feel fulfilled by the criminal justice system. At the end of the day, and I'll tell you, at the sentencing of the first murder case I worked on, I looked back, and the defendant's mom and the victim's children were sitting together, crying, holding each other. Because the defendant's mom knew she was not going to see her son again outside of bars or glass. And the victim's family knew that their mom was never coming back. She wasn't going to be there for birthdays, holidays, or anything. Is that really justice? It wasn't restorative justice because there was no healing. Was our community safe from somebody who had killed once and now had killed again? Yes. Was he going to the appropriate place because he could not be a safe person in our community? Yes. Was there healing? No. And it wasn't at that time, but looking back on it, I see an opportunity. And I've had this conversation with one of our victims' rights providers, is that I see restorative justice as an opportunity to sit for all parties involved, I call it front end and at the back end. Sometimes it diverts cases away from the criminal justice system on our low-level offenses, and that we can do a peace circle, and that we're not going into the criminal justice system. We hold those charges in abeyance and see if we can come up with a community resolution. Sometimes. But then there are times, like I just described, following a murder conviction that might be 2 or 3 years later, and everyone is still hurting because that doesn't go away in a community. That reverberates. That translates. That family feels the loss. Both families are feeling it. And that might be an opportunity for them to say, hey, prosecutor's office, I'm interested in meeting with my offenders, can we come up to Lansing? And making that bridge between victim services and making that a service that is available is something that I'm very interested in. And expanding our program to post-judgment so that we can have conversations in prisons, conversations on parole, conversations on probation, and so that our community is truly healing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so restorative justice, it's a phrase that's bandied around a lot. It's sort of a buzzword now, but it has a very specific meaning. And what it means fundamentally is that the person responsible for the harm sits, it's sort of a mediated session with the survivor of the crime. And it incentivizes the individual that committed the harm to take responsibility for what they did, which is something you often don't see in the adversarial system, because as soon as you take responsibility, right, that's, you're saying you're guilty. And they work out together a way to make amends, right, to heal the harm that has been done. And it can be very individualized, right? Sometimes the survivor will say, I want restitution in some form or another, but I know you can't pay, so I want you to provide services to me, which happens a lot because sometimes, the people know each other, right? Oftentimes the survivor of the crime and the person that did it are people that are acquainted, right? Sometimes they say, I want you to go back to school. I want you to, get a job and to move on with your life. I want something good to come out of this, right? So it's individualized. And from my perspective, restorative justice is transformative, not just because the data shows that it reduces recidivism because the offender truly internalizes, right? Why the harm that they caused was wrong, but also it empowers victims. We have been told for so long in this country that listening to victims means trying to seek as long of a sentence for the person that harmed them as possible. We say, we are going to teach this person not to do bad things by doing a bad thing, by harming them. Don't commit harm, and we're going to do that by harming them, right? But in fact, what restorative justice teaches us is actually a lot of survivors of crimes don't necessarily want that. They want ownership over the process. There's great work being done in New York City, I think the best restorative justice program in the criminal system in the country, by a woman named Danielle Surratt, and she does restorative justice as a diversionary program, bringing the victim and the offender together for a wide array of crimes, even ranging up to violent crimes, right? And what's startling about this is that when you always give the victim a choice, you don't ever force them into doing this, but when given a choice, 90% of the victims, the survivors of crime, say that they would prefer restorative practices to traditional criminal justice system, right? And to me, that's really powerful. It suggests that standing for victims means giving them autonomy, means listening to them as individuals. I think we need to dramatically expand on the use of restorative justice in this county. I know we've got some great organizations that are doing work in the juvenile system, the peacemaking court, but it is a transformative system of justice that can not only heal the community, can give victims the healing that they need, and can ultimately mend the fabric of our society.
Thank you so much.
Restorative justice. To understand something, we need to understand how it got started. We know that restorative justice got started by a group of ministers, of reverends, people building restorative justice on the Bible itself, of being able to make amends, of being able to have redemption. So we understand the genesis of restorative justice. It's a wonderful thing to talk about restorative justice. It's quite something else to be the living example of it. Ladies and gentlemen, when we deal with restorative justice, there was a man by the name of Theodore Roosevelt who once said, "No man is above the law, neither is he below it." It starts at the top. The next Washtenaw County Prosecutor Attorney has got to have that indelibly etched in his or her mind. No man is above the law, nor is he below it. When the chief law enforcement officer of this county has that first and foremost in their mind, that's going a long way towards restorative justice. Because if we don't have a problem initially, then we have no problem to solve. If we have police and law enforcement that are enforcing the laws fairly and equitably, without regard to demographics or race or stereotype or racism, that is restorative justice. When we have youth that are not tracked in the juvenile system, a pipeline to the adult system, a pipeline to the penitentiary, when we stop that cycle, because we let people know, and we let law enforcement know, we're not going to over-police and over-penalize certain communities at the expense or to the help of others. That is restorative justice. When a man or woman comes out of the penitentiary, did you know that under the current system, when you or your loved ones get a parole, you know that I, as an ex-prosecutor, can appeal that? and seek application leave to appeal, to block that parole, to say, no, you're not worthy of coming out. But you, if you're denied a parole, you have no recourse. Did you know that? Did you know that? So the next Washtenaw County Prosecutor has got a person that's willing to say, and I'm taking this pledge right now, if a person earns a parole from the Michigan Department of Corrections, I am not the person that's best suited to judge their capabilities and their advancement while they're incarcerated. The Department of Corrections, the parole board, is the best person to do that. Unless I think a person is a clear and present danger to you, the citizens in your family, I'm not going to object to their parole. I'm not going to say that me sitting in my office on Main Street knows better than the Michigan Department of Corrections. I'm going to give that person a fair chance, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to give that person a fair chance. That is restorative justice. When you have a victim of a crime that knows that they are in fact cared for and that they're going to be looked after and be made whole. And I agree with what my opponents say. We've got to make people whole. Incarceration doesn't have to be the answer. Healing circles, restoration, counseling, all those things are legitimate. That is restorative justice. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, for the man or woman out in the streets, you or your family members, when you know that your prosecutor is dedicated to you and your safety, that goes to bed thinking about your safety, gets up thinking about your safety, demands your safety be first and foremost in his mind and the minds of his staff, that for you, ladies and gentlemen, your families, is restorative justice.
Thank you. But I thank everyone for coming out. Questions real quick. We got about 10 minutes for, everybody got questions. We got 10 minutes. Let me start with, I always like to do, the young man raised his hand up first. I like to do women first, but go ahead, I'll deal with you first.
Okay.
And who's this addressing to?
Well, I'm going to address it to two of them. So, Ariane, a lot of what you seem to say is that a lot of what you seem to say about Eli's ideas is that it can't be done, it can't be done, it can't be done. And what I'd like to know is what ideas you have that are outside of the box thinking, that are different than what we've done before, because what we've been talking about, it seems to be just what we've done before, what we've done up until now. What do you think we can do new? And then also for Eli, I want to know how you're going to change the culture of the office, because it's not just enough to have plans and policies, and you can give all kinds of written stuff, etc. But you need to figure out how you're going to change the culture, the way people think, the way people behave in their offices. So those are the issues.
And I'm going to actually just take 2 to 3 minutes on your answer.
So, can everyone hear the question? The gentleman wanted to know what can be done. Because I've said no to a lot of stuff because I'm not willing to, violate any laws or anything like that. I'm an inherent rule follower. So, I do not believe that the prosecutor's office should be acting in place of a defense attorney for expungements. I also don't believe in the same metrics for the cash bail system. Other than that, we don't have too many systemic differences. So that's where I have said no, where I'm saying that it can't be done. But one of the things that they're not currently doing, which I believe would be innovative, is to bring that LEAD program into the Washtenaw County Prosecutor's Office, is to have a diversion program for adults, for those who are in crisis for mental health, and those who are in crisis for substance abuse, and hold their charged cases in abeyance so that we don't actually charge them, that they're not acquiring a record, and diverting them out of the criminal justice system, meaning if they complete their treatment and their community follow-up, is that they're having a brush with law enforcement, but it's not resulting in a criminal conviction, and I think that's extremely important. In addition to that, bringing in the restorative justice practices is something that in the adult criminal system, we have not done at all. And that is something that I think is extremely important to building a stronger and smarter prosecutor's office going forward. I also have a lot of ideas about the restructure of the current prosecutor's office, which would kind of eliminate one unit, which is the preliminary exam unit, so that we have prosecutors that are able to spend more time with their files and that they will be working in teams. They will have 2 prosecutors and an advocate in circuit court, and that will give them the opportunity to spend that time that we were talking about where everyone feels rushed in the system. And I think that is going to work not only for the victims of the crime, for the police officers where we're giving advice and feedback to and telling them this is how things are, this is our expectation that we have. And in addition to that, to the defendant, so that we are having time and that we can have those candid conversations with the defense attorneys and that we know what we're talking about. Those plea agreements that we mentioned earlier, they're agreements between the attorneys, those are called Killebrew agreements, those have to be adopted by the judge. Or a Cobb's agreement. A lot of times those plea agreements, and in a lot of, like I said, pay attention in 2020 to the judicial races, sometimes the prosecutor can object and say, I don't want to have an agreement. I want this to go to trial. And the judge can say, I'm making this offer for you. And if the defendant and their defense attorney takes it, the prosecutor can stand on their head and spin around in a circle and it doesn't matter. That plea can be accepted. So there are a lot of novel things, and I think that the diversion programs, especially for mental health and substance abuse, but training is another thing that I'm also bringing into the prosecutor's office to another level. I've talked to most of the police chiefs and having regular training. Right now the police are trained once a year, maybe. And usually it's after they've been working a night shift, and they come over in the morning, and they're sleeping like this. Wake up, and we ask them to be responsible for all the case law that's happened in the last year, and then we all get really mad at them when they screw it all up, right? And so to have those bi-weekly trainings where we have prosecutors out sharing the new developments in case law, sharing what the expectations are of the prosecutor's office, and so that we are rooting out any issues earlier on and making sure that our objectives are accomplished.
Thank you. Eli.
Yeah, so in terms of changing the culture of the office, you know, I am really hopeful that when I win and when I get into office, you know, we're going to sit down, we're going to have conversations with each and every attorney that is there. I understand that, you know, a lot of people are following directives and they don't necessarily have the current office's policies, you know, in the core of their heart. And I'm confident that you know, they're going to be on board with change. But then you got to look at, you know, and if folks aren't, then it may be a tougher conversation than for others. But looking forward, right? There's going to be opportunities to hire new people into the office, right? And I think the position that I've staked out is that we are really looking at transforming what a prosecutor's office looks like and what it does. Right? I believe that criminal justice reform is the civil rights issue of our time. And what we are going to do in terms of staffing out the office is I'm going to recruit lawyers that represent the diversity of this community, that are similarly committed to criminal justice reform from the inside as a civil rights issue. We've got some of the future lawyers, the future civil rights lawyers of America that are standing right back here, you know, undergrads that are looking to go into law school, folks at the law school that are volunteering for my campaign, you know, folks that are looking at applying to law school the next year. I think this campaign is attracting excitement. I think that you're seeing the progressive prosecutor movement attract excitement and attract a different type of lawyer into the prosecutor's office. And that's what we're going to go after.
Right in the back.
Thank you. So I have a question. It's Ellie, not Eli, right? How do you pronounce it?
So I'm running as Eli. Ellie's the Hebrew pronunciation.
Okay, Ellie. So I absolutely love your big ideas. But I think that this race, as important as it is about judgment. And so my concern is that not ever having been a prosecutor, you're gonna have a learning curve. And I'm really worried about that learning curve time. It feels like the way crime has changed in Washtenaw County, experience is not such a dirty word. And I'm pretty sure there's more than one way to blow up the prosecutor's office. Having a black woman in that job, probably not the same as having a white guy. So, and I'm terrified of a privileged person coming in, never having done a job before, saying they're gonna shake it up. Because that didn't work that well for us with Donald Trump, right? So, what I want to know is, how can you make me feel comfortable that coming in from the outside, you can actually come in, not waste our time, waste our resources with a learning curve, and to actually make the legal changes that you can make that are in your purview, not other big ideas that are outside what you could do. So convince me. I am terrified about this.
Let me say something real quick. As the mediator, I understand her question, but I think that's...
Can't hear.
I think that's not a fair question and say that he's privileged because he's white.
No, I didn't say he was privileged because he was white.
What did you
I just said he was privileged, and he is, and he acknowledges that. He's fine with that.
Privilege as what?
There are many ways to be privileged, and I know that he knows that. You are fine with that definition, are you not?
So
Yeah.
go ahead.
So it's a fair question. Thank you.
Look, thank you for your question. And what I'll say is this. I think we've had some back and forth about my ideas and the question of whether it's legal to do what I'm proposing. And you know, I've cited court rule definitions. I've cited things that people have done elsewhere, right? I've got the goods. I don't say stuff without thinking them through. You know, so I hope that getting a little bit, and I'm more than happy to talk to you about specifics, right? I love details, to get into the specifics of each and everything that I am going to do as prosecutor and grill me on, right? Grill me on the legal specifics. I got the goods, I got the backup. You know, look, my job right now, if you're concerned about being unsafe, and I don't, you know, you say you're terrified, you're concerned about being unsafe. My day job is in one of the most violent big cities in America. I work closely with the police force. I've ridden in police cruisers on the east side of Detroit, you know, where the drug trade is fueling gang violence. I've sat in ceasefire circles where, you know, we call in gang members and we give them a choice. We say, look, we are concerned about gun violence, right? And if you continue to shoot people, then that is going to be treated really harshly. By the way, here's an off-ramp. If you want to get out of the gang lifestyle, we're going to connect you with resources. We're going to connect you with, you know, job support, training, all of that. It's proved very successful, right? The precincts in which we have this ceasefire program, we see double-digit declines in crime in the most violent big city in America. I sit around the round table with entire Detroit Police Department command staff on a bi-weekly basis. I'm not somebody that's coming in this from no public safety perspective. I know what works, I know what needs to be done. I have the legal goods to back up my big ideas. I also do fundamentally think that what we have been doing for the past several decades has not only been you know, bad for offenders, it's made us less safe, right? Prison, jail, the cycle of putting people in and out of the system over and over again, it's not rehabilitating, right? I've seen that over and over again in my day job, right? I work with you know, former gang members that are coming back and helping the community and are engaged. I'm an on-the-ground person, okay? And I have on-the-ground experience working with public safety, working with returning citizens in, again, you know, one of the most troubled big cities in America. I'm proud of my work there. It's something that is a perspective that I'm going to bring here. You have nothing to fear from me. I am not Donald Trump, in case, you know, I don't think Donald Trump is going to like much of the stuff that I said. I write a lot of bad things about him online. If you follow my Twitter account, that's at ELIN Savage, so check that out. So if you think that I'm Donald Trump, then I hope I can assuage you of that concern. But look, I got the goods. I think through things. I have a perspective in public safety, and I'm more than happy to talk to you or anybody in the audience. Call me, email me if you want more specifics on what I'm going to do and why it will work. Thank you.
All right, thank you. This is the last question. Closing statements.
Well, I'm gonna try to make this a good question.
Come on up so they can hear you.
Yeah, this is for all three candidates.
Speak in the mic, please.
She's multitasking.
Hello. Yeah. Okay, so my name is Angela Amison, and this
Speak in the mic.
As the lady who just came before me said that she's terrified, I'm terrified as well. This race means so much to me as not only as a mother, as a wife, as a black person living in Washtenaw County, specifically Ypsi, where I see the Washtenaw County Prosecutor Office as an adversary. And so one of the things that was really kind of upsetting to me, listening to this debate or forum or whatever, was that for a while, Prosecutor Slay, you refused to even acknowledge the personhood of these offenders and how much, not only as people who do come back to this community, you say that there's a compass that is done at the jails, but yet we still have a 70% rate of recidivism. So, and you doubted that was something that you piloted, that was something that you were the first to do, and yet it's not working. It disenfranchises people that look like me, my husband, my children, my brother. You say in the whole time when we were giving, when both candidates were giving options of restoration, the whole time you kept saying what wasn't your job, what somebody else could do. I want to know, what are you truly going to do? Because this really means the difference between my cousins, my brothers, and I don't want the black card just because that's a selling point. Like this is who, what is it? We said 80% of the people that's housed right across the street, they look like me, they look like him, they don't know, so we don't have, or we're talking about privilege, but there's privilege on both sides too. That's right. Okay? So, often in Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County, we say that we're progressive, and we're often progressive in the wrong way, and I don't want the slide or the vote just to go to you because you're a woman, when you're not going to give us anything different. And I really need to know, not what somebody else's job is, but what your job is, because I'm also a survivor of sexual assault in this community, where I went up to the prosecuting office and I pleaded so they could look at my face. Because they acquitted my assailant because he wouldn't take a plea deal. They sit there and they decided to throw out medical evidence, witness statements, and everything because he wouldn't take a plea. And there's a lot of women who look like me, black and poor child, that don't get justice in this community because who we are, because what we look like. So don't tell me what somebody else's job is. What is going to be your job to help people like me, my husband, my children, to look at that office and to say, that's a friend. Because now I have 2 black daughters, and I'm going to have to tell them that their bodies are not safe in Washtenaw County. I have a black son that won't have to sit there and say, you stay away from the police because they're going to send you away. That is the true look of this. And these 2 candidates are the only ones who sat up here and he would even acknowledge race. And yet you want to say, I'm black too. That's my community. Well, say, acknowledge it. Because that office, this office, it has a classism and racism problem. And for you to talk about some woman that was up in the Upper Peninsula, wherever you was at, but you didn't say anything about your colleagues that's right across the table from you, that's a problem too.
Okay, what's the question, dear?
Sorry, what you gonna do?
All right.
I'm sorry about your experience, because I have worked for almost a decade to try to eliminate the experience that you had. I work with the police. I have written a protocol for domestic violence. I have spearheaded the lethality protocol following sexual assault and domestic violence that just passed 2 weeks ago. That has been my life's work. And that's what I'm going to continue to do regardless. So that is one thing, and what I will do, what I have been doing, and what I will continue to do. I don't want to get up here and talk about race and the fact that I'm a woman. Y'all have eyes, you can see me. I'm not asking you to vote for me because of what I look like or because of my gender. I am asking you to vote for me because I have the experience and the knowledge to protect this community, and I hope that I can protect you, and I am a mom too. I have 2 little ones. One of it, Landon, thank you, got a sign, I think it says, "I love you, mommy." I have black children that my husband and I are raising right now, and we also live in Ypsilanti. And as the sheriff is very famous for saying, when a police officer walks up to your car, they don't have a badge that says, "I'm the one." We don't know that they are great officers out there. But for as many great officers out there, there are a couple of them we don't want here, that we don't want in our community. And their bad actions make it bad for all of the great ones. Okay? And so it is my responsibility to not only train them, weed out the ones that we don't want, because race is an issue. But I'm not going to stand up here and say, vote for me because of what I look like. Because then I'm no better than the generations before me that would say, vote for me because I'm a white man and I can do it. I'm asking you to give me consideration based on what I have done, what I am currently doing at the City of Ann Arbor as a prosecutor, that I'm already employing restorative justice practices, that I'm already employing diversion practices, that I'm not prosecuting DWLS cases for people who can't afford to pay off their parking citations, that I'm working with people, I'm working in the specialty courts, I'm already doing that. I'm asking for you to look at my record, not for you to, and I'm telling you, I'm not going to tell you stuff that's going to make you feel good. I'm not going to walk around and tell you, this is the national narrative and this is what we're going to do in Washtenaw County and just to get you to clap before I leave. I won't do that. You're better than that and you're smarter than that. Besides, you're all going to fact check me when I leave anyway. But what I will ask for you to do is to take a look at what I have done. This isn't for me, it's about experience. And it's about my commitment to not only those who have been victims of crime, but take a look around. When we go to the courtrooms, watch our trials. The victims of crime and the offenders of crime are us. It's black on black crime, like 99% of the time. We are the same people. So we have to acknowledge that as well. And if we are not looking at it comprehensively and collaboratively, where we're working with our community partners to find solutions, then we're not really working.
Thank you. Closing statement real quick so we can get on out of here. Start with you. Here we go. 2-minute closing statement.
Well, my watch just stopped, so it's going to be out of here.
Oh, we got it right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, at 65 years of age, I think I've earned a right to be very truthful and transparent with all of you. I have, through my life experiences, a unique, once in a millennium, lifetime experience to offer you, the residents of Washtenaw County, all 235,000 of you. You know, the greatest book that I ever read told me about a guy named Joseph. Wrong happened to him. He didn't become bitter, but he became better. There was a purpose for him, to make it better for those that came after him. And you know, ladies and gentlemen, I'm stuck on the truth. And if people don't accept the truth, that's between them and God. But I'm telling you right now, my entire fiber, my every being is for social justice. The next Washtenaw County Prosecuting Attorney is going to be the most powerful person in this county, with the ability to impact your life and the lives of your families with a stroke of a pen. You need somebody that understands the system intimately. And I know no one likes to think of their relatives being incarcerated. I know some people look down their noses at defendants. That chair is only for the bad people, the people from that side of town. You know, the mud people, only them. Until it happens to them and their family. Then it's not so funny then, you understand? People coming out of the penitentiary, looking down your noses at them, shunning them, keeping them outcasts, won't give them a decent job despite their qualifications. You need a prosecutor that's going to advocate for that and dedicate as I am dedicated to your public safety. Whether you be the victim of a crime or the perpetrator of a crime, you're going to be given an opportunity to restore and to join us. That is the vision that I have for this county and for the safety of all the people in it. And I hope you give me a chance to prove that to you. Thank you.
Talked a lot about experience and resumes and qualifications, but I want to talk a little bit about what this is really about. I've been privileged to meet with so many people over the course of this campaign, to talk to them and hear their stories. And one person that I met with just this last week, it's just been ringing in my head, what she told me since then. She said, look, I've got a brother that hasn't spent a day outside of or a birthday outside of the correctional system since the time he was a teenager. The first time that he was arrested, he was 11 years old. We're running away from home. And I'm afraid that he is cycling in and out of the system, and at some point, he may hurt somebody because he just doesn't have, the connections outside of the community. Because we've been incarcerated, we've incarcerated people for so long. When you think about reform, I think about that 11-year-old kid. I think that's a child. That's a child that is going through trauma. That's a child that is dealing with stuff. That is not a case which we should be putting somebody behind bars for, an 11-year-old, right? And not only is it offensive to the personhood of a child, it's something that is counterproductive and makes all of us less safe. Because the prison system, the jail system, it is not a place for rehabilitation. And when you put people, especially young people, into a juvenile detention center, into a prison setting, they are hardwired to make social connections. And they're going to make social connections with people that are also in there for crimes, potentially gang members too. These are the stories. This is the system that I am running to reform. And if I'm privileged enough to be your next prosecutor, I promise you, we will have wholesale change. Thank you.
I appreciate you all spending hours and hours of your Saturday, and I'm sure there's lots of football that you guys could be watching today. But I appreciate that. I believe that I would make an excellent county prosecutor for you. But not just for you, but to be an example for the rest of the state of Michigan, and hopefully this country, about bringing true criminal justice reform to Washtenaw County. I will do so within the confines of the law. I encourage each and every one of you to be that person in your community that is contacting your local representatives and your senators and talking to them about these challenges that we are currently facing and how we can only go so far alone. The laws are going to have to change. So I'm encouraging you not only to be active in your local party, whatever your affiliation is, be active. A lot of people have fought for and died for the right to vote. We need to make sure that we do that. Pay attention not only to this race, but to do our judicial races and all of the county races and city races coming up, because those are our funding sources. I am coming to you humbled after over a decade of experience as being a prosecutor. I understand what it takes to do the reforms and to do it well. I promise I will continue to put your interests first, whether you are a defendant on the other side of the podium, whether you are a victim of a crime, or whether you are a mom just like myself, where you don't want to have that conversation with your son about what to do when he gets pulled over. It is past time up for having to have that conversation with our kids. There is an opportunity here for growth for all of us. And I am asking that you grow with me. If you have questions, I know you've been here a long time, feel free to stop in and we'll have a sign up over here. You can put your name on the email list or get contact information, or feel free to go to arianeslay.com. I appreciate all of you and travel safely.
Let's give them all a